It was past midnight when something strange happened. A dog was sniffing the ground near a quiet riverbank. Suddenly, an unmistakable, pungent stench rose from the ground. Something terrible was buried there. What followed was a horrifying discovery. The bodies of the girls so decomposed that they could only be identified by their feet, all bound, their throats slit, and their mouths gagged. Just days earlier, the three young women had set off on what was supposed to be a fun trip. They told their families they were going to the beach with friends, but they never returned. What happened to them? The answer would shock the nation. The truth was darker and more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. In the heart of Santo Domingo, Ecuador, three young women, Juliana Macias, Denise Reina, and Nayeli Tapia, were full of dreams and ambitions. They had met through mutual friends, and their connection grew quickly, rooted in their shared passions for music, modeling, and a better future. Juliana, nicknamed Syria after the Greek goddess, was known for her intelligence, determination, and cheerful spirit. She excelled in school, earning the honor of being her class's flag bearer. But her true passion was music. With a strong singing voice and big ambitions, she dreamed of studying psychology, becoming a famous singer, and traveling the world. At just 21, Juliana was already performing solo, singing at political events, and had recently joined a band called Las Diablitas. To her, success felt closer than ever. Nayeli, 22, was admired for her warmth and generosity. A devoted young mother to her 4-year-old daughter, she had moved from Quito to Santo Domingo to live with her sister. Between modeling gigs and caring for her little girl, she dreamed of moving to Spain, believing it would open doors to a brighter future. No matter how busy life got, being a mother always came first for her. Denise, only 19, was a kind and thoughtful young woman studying agricultural engineering. She loved helping others and once dreamed of opening a veterinary clinic, but later focused on finishing her degree. Her new goal was to move to the United States and build a fresh start. She always thought ahead, carefully planning her future. But even the best-laid plans can't prepare someone for what's to come. On Tuesday, April 4, 2023, their lives took a devastating turn. Around 9 a.m., a black car arrived at Denise's house. She had been invited on a trip to the Casablanca Hotel, a resort by the coast. Something inside her hesitated. She didn't feel right about going, but despite her unease, she got into the car. Later that day, she and the driver picked up Nayeli, who had just returned to Santo Domingo. That afternoon, both young women reassured their families. They were heading to the coast with friends. That night, they picked up Juliana, who told her grandmother she was going to meet a friend. What began as an innocent late-night road trip was about to spiral into tragedy. At 11:10 p.m., Nayeli sent her sister a live location with a chilling note. She was sharing it just in case. Moments later, her phone went silent. No calls, no replies. The sudden, heavy silence was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Elsewhere that same night, Denise also reached out to a close friend. Her message carried a haunting weight. She admitted she had a bad feeling, that something awful might happen, and if it did, she wanted her friend to know just how much she loved her. As the night stretched into the early hours of the 5th of April, one of Denise's relatives received a message claiming she was still with Nayeli and some friends. Around the same time, Juliana uploaded a video status. The girls were in a car, singing, smiling, their voices blending with the music that filled the night. Then, silence. Morning came, but the girls did not return. Their phones went dead. No posts, no calls, no trace. Their families, gripped by panic and confusion, waited desperately for news that never came. On Wednesday, the 5th of April, Juliana's aunt, Rueda, a well-known women's rights activist, took the first step. She went straight to the authorities and reported her niece missing. A day later, on Thursday, The 6th of April, a group of fishermen made a horrifying discovery near a riverbank. One of their dogs began digging furiously at disturbed earth. As the men approached, a foul stench filled the air. Beneath the soil lay the partial remains of a body. Police rushed to the scene. When investigators began digging, they quickly realized the horror was far greater. There wasn't just one body. There were 3, all bound at the wrists, all showing signs of torture. The injuries were deep, savage, and clearly caused by sharp weapons, likely machetes. Forensic teams worked quickly to recover the bodies and transport them for autopsy. The confirmation came within hours. The victims were Denise Reyna, 19, Juliana Macias, 21, and Nayeli Tapia, 22. 2 of them had been found with their mouths taped shut, dressed in light beachwear, bathing suits and shorts. The news devastated their families. Many had still believed the girls would return home alive. Instead, they were met with the unimaginable reality of walking into a morgue. Paulina, always at the forefront, handled the identification of Juliana, but the injuries to her face were so severe that she could only be recognized by the shape of her toes. In the days that followed, the families gathered, piecing together every detail of what they knew from that night. Whispers of something sinister surfaced. They believed the killers might have used chemicals to speed up decomposition. Some even feared acid had been involved. Authorities, however, remained tight-lipped. One official said the forensic results were confidential. Another dismissed the acid theory as speculation from grieving relatives. The public was shaken. News of the murders spread quickly, igniting outrage across Ecuador. Social media flooded with grief, anger, and demands for justice. Photos of the 3 young women, once symbols of joy and promise, now became a national outcry. Their families were vocal, insisting the investigation must continue until the truth was uncovered and those responsible were held accountable. As investigators pressed forward, early theories began to take shape. Then, the autopsy results arrived, and they confirmed the worst fears. The examination revealed that all 3 had died from deep slash wounds to the neck, inflicted by a sharp, bladed weapon. Their bodies bore unmistakable signs of torture, details almost too horrific to speak aloud. On the 9th of April, 2023, the families laid their daughters to rest in Santo Domingo. The funerals were heartbreaking, filled with tears and tributes. Family and friends chose to remember them for the happiness they brought to others during their lives. During the service, Paulina Rueda, Juliana Macias aunt, was approached and threatened by a man in a cap and mask. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. The threat sent waves of fear through the grieving families. For days, Nayeli and Denise's relatives pulled back from the media, choosing silence over danger. But Paulina refused to be silenced. She went public with the threat and requested inclusion in Ecuador's witness protection program. Authorities initially promised to accompany the families and evaluate their case. But according to Paulina, protection never came. Even so, the fight for justice only grew stronger. Despite fear and uncertainty, the families of all 3 young women eventually stepped forward to speak with a local news outlet. They shared memories, stories, and the dreams that Juliana, Nayeli, and Denise would never have the chance to fulfill. None of them knew who the friends were, that the girls were supposed to meet that night. All they wanted were answers, justice, and closure. They also pleaded with the public to come forward with any information that might help identify those responsible. But as their voices grew louder, so did the noise. Online rumors began to swirl. One particularly cruel claim suggested the girls may have been linked to banned substance trafficking. Paulina quickly shut those allegations down, making it clear there was no evidence to support such rumors and urging the public not to spread misinformation that only distracted from the investigation. A video added further fuel to the fire. It showed Juliana singing at a bar alongside a man named Roberto Zambrano and a small group of others. Some insisted it had been filmed just hours before the murders. But Roberto himself stepped forward, clarifying that the video was recorded weeks earlier during his birthday celebration. He had nothing to do with the crime. Still, the damage to his name was severe. His career, reputation, and family life were thrown into chaos, forcing him to announce plans to file a defamation lawsuit. Paulina confirmed his account, stressing that the video was completely unrelated to the case. As time went on, more rumors surfaced, some collapsing under the weight of evidence, others fading into silence. Meanwhile, investigators pressed forward. Then came a breakthrough. Police identified the black vehicle that had picked up the girls. It was a rental car, using GPS data. They reconstructed the route taken that night. Every turn, every stop, every mile traveled before the murders. Near the site of the shallow graves, they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. One of the victims' cell phones, abandoned by the killers. It would soon become a key element in the pursuit of justice. In the wake of national outrage, Ecuador's Attorney General's office activated its official protocol for investigating femicides and violent crimes against women. The brutality of the case had horrified the nation, and now every eye was fixed on the investigation. Journalists followed every lead, and every new detail became headline news. Yet behind the scenes, progress was difficult. Much of the case remained under wraps. Officials announced that the full investigative report would remain sealed for at least 1 year. The lead prosecutor admitted that the remote location of the crime posed major obstacles. There were no nearby security cameras and no eyewitnesses, or at least none willing to speak. But the silence would not last forever. Soon, investigators reported another breakthrough. Through security footage, emergency response systems, and cooperation from local residents, they identified 2 men who had been seen with the victims on the 4th of April. These men became prime suspects. Still, investigators remained guarded, needing time to compile enough technical evidence to hold up in court. Meanwhile, the families refused to remain quiet. On May 3rd, nearly a month after the disappearances, they organized a massive demonstration, a white march, held on Friday, May 6th. Rueda, always leading from the front, declared that the march was not only about demanding justice, but also about urging the nation to stop normalizing violence against women. She vowed they would not rest until the killers were behind bars. Then came a dramatic announcement. In a police operation code named Armageddon, the Minister of the Interior confirmed the arrest of 2 men, believed to be directly responsible for the murders. Brothers André Zambrano, 27, and Holger Zambrano, 34. The pair had been attempting to flee toward the Peruvian border. One of them already had a criminal record for extortion. A judge swiftly ordered the freezing of their assets and granted extended protection measures to witnesses and the victims' families. But the case didn't end there. Investigators soon uncovered more names connected to the crime. One of them was Omar Ordóñez, a close associate of the Zambrano brothers. In November 2023, he was tracked down in a neighboring province. Omar wasn't just a friend of the brothers. He had links to a criminal organization and a past filled with illegal weapons charges. The 4th suspect, Luis Fernandez Votza, was believed to be the driver of the car that transported the girls on that tragic night. But authorities never got the chance to question him. His body was later discovered, dismembered, in what investigators called a targeted killing. At first, prosecutors filed charges of femicide, but later reclassified them as murder. The reasoning, according to court documents, there was no proof of a romantic or emotional connection between the suspects and the victims. But to Paulina, that argument was insulting. To her, it didn't matter if these men were strangers. This was violence against women in its most brutal form. Then came the courtroom battle. Holger, who rented the car, was acquitted after proving he wasn't present during the killings. But André and Omar faced trial on April 9, 2024. Prosecutors brought forward forensic reports, autopsy results, and testimonies from witnesses who had seen the accused with the victims. Even staff from the car rental agency took the stand, sealing the chain of evidence. On May 17, 2024, 1 year and 1 month after the murders. The verdict finally came down. The court sentenced André Zambrano and Omar Ordóñez to 34 years and 8 months in prison. They were also ordered to pay $300,000 in reparations to the victims' families, plus an additional fine of more than $600,000. Outside the courthouse, Paulina spoke through tears. She described the relief that swept over the families for the loved ones of Juliana, Denise, and Nayeli. It had been a year-long fight. Now, at last, they could breathe. But even then, the case wasn't closed. The defense immediately filed an appeal. On October 22, 2024, the provincial court upheld the original ruling. 34 years and 8 months behind bars for both André and Omar. It was a historic moment in Ecuador's battle against gender-based violence. Still, the defense threatened to push the case to the National Court of Justice. The last possible appeal. This case didn't just scar the nation, it sparked a movement. Juliana, Denise, and Nayeli were more than just victims. They were daughters, students, a mother, dreamers. 3 women full of life and purpose. Stolen in an act of senseless cruelty, their story changed the conversation around femicide in Ecuador, and their families refused to stay silent. Some crimes are not only tragic but also serve as chilling reflections of how love, fear, and cultural conflicts can lead to devastating outcomes. Initially, this is a story about a couple in love who are eagerly anticipating their first child, a period that should be filled with joy and hope. She was 7 months pregnant, excitedly sharing her experiences of motherhood with friends and family. He is a man about to become a father, but is torn between his love for her and his family's strict Islamic values. However, behind closed doors, tension was building. Cultural differences, unexpressed fears, and hidden shame began to warp their relationship into something much more troubling. Communication became cold. Ultimatums were issued, and what should have been their happiest moments turned into a nightmare. In April 2023, that nightmare reached a climax. A mother soon discovers a horrifying scene. Her daughter and unborn grandson have been murdered, and all their hopes are shattered in the blink of an eye. What truly happened in that apartment? How did love transform into violence? What role did cultural pressures and secrecy play in pushing an expectant father to his breaking point? Stay with us, as the investigation reveals that the truth behind this tragedy is more complex, darker, and more haunting than anyone could have anticipated. In April 2023, Saga Forsgren Elneborg was 7 months pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin Abdirisek Ibrahim, who is also the father of her baby. They had been together for about 2 years and were expecting a boy, with doctors confirming that everything was progressing well. As her due date approached, Saga eagerly prepared for motherhood. She documented her pregnancy on social media, sharing photos of her growing bump and baby gear, especially the clothes she bought for her baby. On the eve of a tragic event, Saga's mother, Melisa, came to visit and help her. On April 28, Saga was supposed to meet with Mohammed Amin for some quality time, but their relationship had been facing increasing tension, and he had been visiting less frequently. Saga informed her mother about his visit, so she chose not to interrupt them. Saga is a beautiful girl with many friends, but she still faces concerns from her family about her relationship with Mohammed Amin, who is from a different culture. They were concerned about the challenges of meeting his family in Somalia, especially as she began to struggle with the relationship. However, she remains optimistic. Despite feeling embarrassed that he has not yet made their relationship public to his parents, on April 29, 2023, around 1:00 p.m., Melisa arrived at Saga's apartment, in a residential complex in Örebro, several hundred kilometers from Stockholm. She intended to help her daughter and pick up some items in preparation for the birth of her grandson. When she got to the apartment, she rang the doorbell, but there was no response. Surprised, she rang it several more times and knocked, but still received no answer. Thinking that Saga was simply going out for a while, she hesitated, but eventually decided to use the spare key to get in. However, she discovered the door was not locked, which seemed suspicious since Saga usually locked up. Upon entering, Melissa noticed water running in the kitchen and rushed to turn it off while calling for Saga, but received no reply. As she moved to the next room, where the lights were off, she sensed something was wrong. When she entered and turned the light on, she was horrified to find Saga lying on the floor, lifeless, with pale skin, her hair covering her face, and a lamp cord around her neck. Nearby, a heavy table had been overturned. Adding to the horror of the scene, Melissa rushed to Saga, moved the table away from her neck, and attempted to provide first aid while calling emergency services. Melissa quickly realized that Saga's body was cold and stiff, which indicated that she had been dead for some time. Despite this, Melissa performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Unfortunately, when paramedics arrived, they confirmed that both Saga and her unborn child had died. Police arrived at the scene and began their investigation. Noting that Saga had suffered injuries to her head and face, the area was covered in dried blood and overturned jewelry boxes. Initially, detectives thought Saga may have harmed herself, as there were no signs of a break-in. However, upon closer inspection, they found no signs of mental health issues. In fact, she was excited about her pregnancy and looking forward to becoming a mother. Forensic experts collected fingerprints, blood, and DNA evidence for analysis. They determined that Saga had died from strangulation, estimating the time of death to be between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. In addition, her unborn son, weighing 1.7 kilograms, was found to be healthy. Adding to the family's anger and desire for justice, they were devastated. They never imagined that such violence could happen in their own family. Melissa informed the detectives that Saga had planned to meet friends at a local restaurant on April 28. She noted that her daughter seemed anxious and frequently checked her phone, eager for messages from her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin. Saga mentioned that he was preparing to inform his conservative Muslim parents about their relationship, but she feared they would not accept her because she was 7 months pregnant and they were not officially married. Mohammed Amin, raised in Europe, struggled to balance the expectations of his strict Muslim family with more modern views. After dinner, Saga said goodbye to her mother and friends, who were unaware they were seeing her for the last time. Tragically, she was killed shortly after returning home. Detectives speculated that Mohammed Amin might have revealed their relationship to his parents, provoking a hostile response that led to the tragedy. In the early stages of the investigation, Mohammed Amin's relatives were scrutinized, particularly his mother, who had left the house late that evening. However, it was confirmed that she had simply gone to the store and returned shortly after. No evidence implicated his relatives in the crime. Suspicion also arose from her reaction to discovering Mohammed Amin's car parked near Saga's home. By that point, his family suspected he was involved with a Christian woman. Following that discovery, his mother angrily informed him that he was unwelcome in their home, suggesting she would disown him if he violated their traditions. In response, Mohammed Amin maintained that he had not visited Saga's family. According to Melissa, the relationship between Saga and Mohammed Amin deteriorated from the beginning of her pregnancy. There were rumors that Mohammed Amin wanted her to have an abortion because he was worried about how his family would react. Despite this, Saga decided to keep the baby, expressing her willingness to raise the child alone if needed. In October, she announced her pregnancy to her family, and they were very supportive. During this period, the relationship between Saga and Mohammed Amin faced serious difficulties, and they were on the verge of breaking up. Saga was concerned about the huge cultural differences between the two. making it difficult to find common ground unless Mohammed Amin changed his perspective. Fortunately, after a few months, things seemed to improve as he adapted to her lifestyle and appeared to embrace fatherhood. Saga later moved into a new apartment, renting a larger space that included a children's room. By March 2023, Saga and Mohammed Amin were still together. Although there were troubling signs, a woman named Diana approached Saga with a confidential warning that Mohammed Amin had attempted to cause her to miscarry by harming her. She confronted him about the matter, but he denied it and claimed it was false information. Although Melissa was aware of these alarming events, she was reluctant to accept them. Sadly, after she discovered that her daughter, Saga, had been murdered, the previous testimonies began to seem more credible. The police quickly began piecing together the timeline of events. They determined that on the evening of April 27, Mohammed Amin and Saga were supposed to spend time together, but he seemed to be avoiding her. Staying late at work, that night, Saga issued an ultimatum, demanding he inform his family about their relationship and the baby, or they would break up. On April 28, they communicated throughout the day via messages, and Saga became increasingly anxious. Likely due to the emotional weight of her conversation with him, detectives reviewed mobile phone records showing ongoing messages until 11 p.m. on April 28. Mohammed Amin made it clear he would not disclose the relationship or the pregnancy to his family, prioritizing his family's approval over the child. Saga was disappointed and continued to push him to come clean, suggesting that if they broke up, he could still be exposed as the father. As she planned to seek financial support from him, through their conversations, they both seemed to agree that he would eventually tell his family. Mohammed Amin expressed feeling extremely anxious, saying his heart felt like it would burst. This was his last message to her before she was killed. The detectives suspect that her determination to inform Mohammed Amin's family has created a motive for him to attack her. He became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. Mohammed Amin denied any involvement in Saga's death, claiming that on the night of the murder, he went to his family to confess about their relationship. However, geolocation data indicated this was not true. Instead, he had gone to Saga's apartment. Notably, investigators initially kept information about Saga's death from him. During the interrogation, he acted unnaturally calm, even joking with detectives when they mentioned the apartment where her body was discovered, showing no visible reaction as if he was feigning ignorance. When told he was the main suspect, Mohammed Amin became defensive, insisting he had an alibi and was with a friend when the murder occurred. However, his friend spoke with someone else on the phone during that time and refused to corroborate his story. Although the alibi evidence has been dismissed, he still insists that he last met Saga on the evening of April 27, contrary to what he had previously stated, particularly regarding the apartment he claims to be unaware of. Mohammed Amin said he went to the apartment and talked to Saga about a sensitive issue. Specifically, they discussed the need for him to admit to his parents about their relationship. Saga, on the other hand, encouraged him to move in with her to build a life together. However, during the investigation, detectives discovered that Mohammed Amin had never spent a full night at her apartment because he was afraid his family would find out. Although he promised several times to move in, he always came up with excuses to avoid it. Given Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior, law enforcement decided to arrest him and hold him in custody while they investigated the case. He spent several months in custody, during which the prosecution gathered strong evidence against him. They were confident they had enough to win at trial, and even used specially trained dogs to help identify various pieces of evidence. Mohammed Amin's lawyer argued that dog evidence was unreliable, but it was not the only evidence they had. The DNA analysis took the longest time but ultimately cleared any doubts. Mohammed Amin had wrapped a lamp cord around Saga's neck while she was asleep on the couch. Police said he also pulled her to the floor and attempted to push her onto her stomach to induce an abortion. Saga fought back, managing to close her legs, but suffered a hip injury in the process. Eventually, he tried to strangle her using a tabletop, pressing it against her throat. Exhausted from her struggle, she suffocated under the weight. After her death, the tabletop was left on her neck, creating a deep mark on her body. After committing this crime, Mohammed Amin tried to stage a robbery by scattering boxes around the apartment. His defense claimed that Saga had been a victim of robbers who stole money and several appliances. However, the prosecution argued that this staging only highlighted his guilt. During searches, several stolen items were found on Mohammed Amin. He maintained that they were his personal belongings and gifts from Saga. A significant piece of evidence was that his DNA was found under Saga's fingernails. Furthermore, forensic experts determined that Saga had engaged in intimate behavior shortly before his death. Mohammed Amin claimed it was consensual and had occurred days prior. However, the prosecutor's office questioned the truthfulness of his statements, noting inconsistencies in his accounts during interrogations. His DNA was discovered in multiple locations within Saga's apartment. Despite his initial claim of having no knowledge of the address, investigators also found that a woman named Diana, who had reported Mohammed Amin, was indeed credible. Disturbing search inquiries from him were revealed, including questions about whether a kick to a mother's stomach could harm an unborn child. The hearings have been ongoing since November 2022, during which various communications among the individuals involved were presented as evidence. A conflict arose between Saga and Mohammed Amin regarding her pregnancy. In their last conversation on April 28, Saga pressured Mohammed Amin to tell his family about her. Although the defense highlighted this pressure, it did not excuse his crime. The prosecution argued that, instead of confiding in his family, Mohammed Amin went to her apartment. He had no intention of letting his family know about Saga because he feared their reaction, but she pressed him, putting him in a difficult situation. As a result, he displayed coldness and cruelty towards her due to his unwarranted fear of his parents. The defense argued that Mohammed Amin's DNA under Saga's fingernails may have been present before, when they were in a relationship. However, Melissa, Saga's mother, insisted that her daughter maintained good hygiene, showering regularly, especially during her pregnancy. Melissa testified that Saga was meticulous about cleanliness and would not remain unclean for long after meeting Mohammed Amin. The evidence indicated that Saga had recently showered and worn clean clothes, meaning the DNA found on her was fresh and likely from the time of the attack. After the incident, Mohammed Amin quickly deleted Saga from his Snapchat and cleaned up his social media accounts, raising suspicions. Detectives noted he appeared to be trying to conceal his connection to the crime. Although there was no direct evidence, his actions suggested he was indifferent to Saga. Investigators tracked him to being about 20 yards away from her apartment, where he continued to message someone, seemingly waiting for something, possibly to gather the courage to confront her or ensure she was asleep. There was a period of silence from midnight to 2:00 a.m. when Mohammed Amin's mobile phone showed no activity, except for an attempt to reach his friend Samir, which went unanswered. A call was recorded in the same apartment complex where Saga lived, contradicting Mohammed Amin's claim that he was home with his parents at that time. His phone only connected again at 2:16 a.m., coinciding exactly with the forensic estimate of Saga and her baby's time of death. Mohammed Amin's story changed multiple times. At one point, he claimed that a group of robbers had broken into Saga's house to steal a bag of money he had hidden there. He alleged that Saga tried to stop them and was murdered as a result. The prosecution successfully disproved this narrative, finding no evidence of a break-in. It was clear that Saga must have let her attacker in willingly, or that he had a key, which was plausible given their relationship. Throughout his 9 months of imprisonment, Mohammed Amin never confessed to the crime and consistently denied his involvement. However, the prosecution collected substantial evidence for a strong case. Despite his lack of confession, Mohammed Amin admitted that he was afraid to tell his family about Saga, claiming he loved her and their child. Yet, he believed his conservative parents would reject him for dating a European girl. After listening to both the prosecution and defense, the jury deliberated on the verdict. On June 9, 2024, they unanimously found Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim guilty of the premeditated murder of the girl, leading to a life sentence. Despite this, he maintained his love for both Saga and their unborn son, insisting he never intended to harm them. He claimed that violence was not part of his character, and that this incident was his first criminal offense. However, the investigation revealed that he frequently met with other women throughout their 2-year relationship. Although he denied having extramarital relationships, evidence showed he had intimate encounters with other girls, which tarnished his reputation while he tried to discredit the lawyer. The defense attorney argued that Muhammad Amin was innocent and that Saga was merely a victim of a robbery gone wrong. The attorney vowed to fight for Muhammad Amin's freedom and planned to appeal the verdict. An appeal was filed right after the decision, but the outcome is still uncertain. Notably, although Muhammad Amin faced charges for Saga's murder, he was never held accountable for the death of his unborn child, which angered Saga's family. As the baby's death had been overlooked from the start, the case gained significant public and media attention, highlighting the challenges faced by migrants, especially from Muslim countries, who have been arriving in Sweden increasingly in recent years. Many observe that these newcomers are struggling to integrate into European society and its values, facing resistance from locals despite coming as visitors. This brutal murder, linked to cultural and religious differences, stirred public outrage, prompting demands for action from the state. Meanwhile, some defended Muhammad Amin, arguing that he was not guilty, while his family asserted that he was never cruel. Many were persuaded by this, offering him considerable support. Relatives stated that Muhammad Amin was unprepared for fatherhood, yet he continued to love both Saga and their son, even after their deaths. In Mexico City, Jacobo Quesada, a man from humble origins, has risen to millionaire status, enjoying a brilliant career and a seemingly perfect family. But then, the arrival of a young woman named Berenice Alanis opens the door to tragedy. The affair is not only a betrayal, but also entails blackmail, lust, and a bloody conspiracy. Berenice not only seduces Jacobo, but also sows the seeds of a terrible downfall, a broken marriage, a fractured family, and ultimately, the tragic deaths of Jacobo himself and his 2 children, Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr. This is more than a murder case. This is a story of obsession, greed, and cruelty, where the desire for luxury turns one woman into a darkness that destroys an empire, leaving the whole country shuddering. How can greed turn so deadly? Jacobo Quesada was born on November 17, 1968. In the large city of Mexico, he was the youngest child in a humble middle-class family. Although his parents lived modestly, they worked hard to provide their children with a good education, helping them to achieve success. From a young age, he showed exceptional intelligence. He excelled academically, loved reading, and had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. As a teenager, he became interested in business and exhibited a strong entrepreneurial spirit. After finishing high school, Jacobo gained admission to the prestigious Metropolitan Autonomous University in Mexico City, where he studied economics and business management. He worked diligently and soon started his own business, which thrived rapidly. He had a talent for making smart investments and knew how to grow his wealth wisely over time. He explored various industries without taking unnecessary risks, particularly achieving success in real estate by buying properties in Mexico City, which he rented, renovated, or sold for profit. Within a few years, Jacobo became one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in the city. A decade later, his business empire had flourished, and by the early 2002, He was a millionaire, with his wealth estimated in the tens of millions, and it continued to grow. In 1993, Jacobo married Patricia Arellano, whom he had loved since university. They had an extravagant wedding and settled into a luxurious mansion in one of Mexico City's most affluent neighborhoods. A year later, their daughter Patricia Quesada was born, followed by their son, Jacobo Jr. In 1995, despite his busy schedule, Jacobo devoted time to his family, attending school performances, sports events, and taking them on vacations to top resorts and amusement parks. He aimed to provide the best for his children while ensuring they stayed humble. He prioritized their education, preparing them to one day take over his business, ensuring they didn't grow up spoiled or careless with the wealth he had amassed. The Patricia family was well respected in the community and employed dozens of people, known for their kindness and generosity. In 2003, Jacobo and Patricia hired a new housekeeper, an 18 years old named Berenice. At first, she seemed humble and docile, but then she overturned everything in their lives, destroying what they had built for so long. Berenice Alanis, born July 13, 1985. I grew up in a tough neighborhood on the outskirts of Mexico City. She belonged to a large, devoutly religious family that struggled financially. Her strict upbringing demanded complete obedience, with severe consequences for even minor mistakes. From a young age, Berenice exhibited a rebellious nature, often clashing with her household rules and seeking independence. Once she turned 18, she began working as a housekeeper for Patricia's family, moved into their mansion, and nearly cut ties with her own family. Berenice was incredibly attractive and knew how to leverage her looks to achieve her goals. It's unclear whether she genuinely loved Jacobo or was primarily interested in his wealth, but she wasted no time in pursuing him. She skillfully charmed him while maintaining a facade of innocence. Even though Jacobo was married with 2 children and 17 years older than her, he quickly fell in love with her. Just a month after starting her job, Berenice seduced Jacobo, captivating his attention completely. Ironically, Patricia, Jacobo's wife, had welcomed Berenice into their home and even gifted her items, leading to what appeared to be a friendly connection. However, Patricia was not aware that Berenice was having an affair with her husband in their own home. Berenice had ambitious plans for her future, envisioning herself as the owner of their luxurious home. While many affairs with household staff may not lead to significant fallout, this one did. Less than a year later, Jacobo shocked everyone by asking for a divorce so he could marry Berenice. Patricia felt deeply betrayed and humiliated. While their children were left confused, Jacobo's parents quickly recognized Berenice's true intentions, seeking financial security. Despite this, Jacobo, blinded by emotion, left Patricia and married Berenice in 2004. After the painful separation, Jacobo and Patricia reached an amicable co-parenting agreement for their children. A year later, Patricia remarried, welcomed 2 more children, and found happiness again. Their older children spent more time with Jacobo to maintain stability and continued attending the same school. Being young, they did not hold resentment toward Berenice and eventually adjusted to her presence. Once Berenice legally became Jacobo's wife, she gained full access to his finances. She began to spend extravagantly, indulging in high-end designer clothes and luxury cosmetics, with a Ferrari Enzo gifted by Jacobo and custom jewelry from top brands. Berenice took on a domineering attitude in the household, treating staff, including those she once befriended, with arrogance. She made it clear that their job security depended on her, demanding complete obedience and expecting to be treated like royalty. Berenice had no interest in work or responsibility. Her life revolved around luxury and celebration. She spent her days shopping, attending elitist social events, and throwing extravagant parties. She believes she has joined the upper class, trying to connect with the rich and influential, while cutting ties with old friends and alienating her family. Additionally, she underwent numerous cosmetic surgeries to achieve a Hollywood-like appearance. transforming herself drastically in a short period. Although the Jacobo family disapproved of Berenice, the first few years of their marriage were mostly calm. Jacobo was infatuated and focused on keeping her happy, neglecting to monitor her spending habits. He gave her full financial access, allowing her to spend recklessly for her enjoyment. She traveled the world, often taking friends along and using Jacobo's credit cards to cover costs. She wanted to showcase her ability to spend freely, and her extravagant habits only became more pronounced over time. By the time Berenice married Jacobo, he was almost twice her age, and she viewed him mainly as a means of financial security. Soon after the marriage, she began having affairs with younger men. At first, she was very careful to hide these relationships from her rich and powerful husband, and succeeded in presenting herself as a faithful wife for a long time. Patricia began involving her son Jacobo Jr. and daughter Patricia Quesada in the family business early on, ensuring they would not only inherit it, but also learn how to grow it effectively. After finishing high school, both children enrolled in a prestigious university to study law while working in their father's company for practical experience. Patricia Quesada concentrated on managing real estate, while Jacobo Jr., who loved soccer, pursued opportunities in sports management. To support his son's passion, Jacobo built a large sports complex outside the city and started a youth soccer club called Muscle Factory. The facility had administrative offices on the lower floors and a residential area for family visits on the upper level. Berenice frequently visited the club, sometimes staying for days, but not because she was interested in her husband's business. Instead, she had begun an affair with an attractive young coach, and they carried on their relationship in the residential quarters, believing they wouldn't be discovered. When Jacobo Jr. turned 18, Berenice began to pay attention to him, which confused him. Berenice was 10 years older than him, and she was very charming and confident, which attracted him even more. Eventually, he succumbed to her advances, leading to a long-term affair. Over time, Berenice's sense of power made her less discreet about the relationship. Rumors began to spread among the servants in the house. They exchanged glances with each other, but no one dared to say anything in front of Jacobo. Jacobo remains oblivious, still infatuated with Berenice and fearful of losing her. However, when the truth finally emerged, an explosive scandal erupted. Jacobo felt betrayed, humiliated, and disgraced. Despite the situation, he struggled to leave Berenice. In an attempt to preserve his family, he chose to forgive her and maintain a peaceful relationship with his son. Berenice's infidelity had left their marriage in turmoil, yet Jacobo hesitated to act decisively for months. Life continued as if nothing had changed, with everyone under the same roof pretending that the events were inconsequential. Then, in March 2019, a troubling discovery occurred. While cleaning the master bedroom, a housekeeper found a hidden bundle in a secluded area. Feeling curious, she opened it and was horrified by its contents: wax dolls with human hair, needles, dried leaves, and photographs of Jacobo's children, Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr. The discovery appeared to be linked to a voodoo ritual. The housekeeper immediately suspected that someone was trying to harm Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr., and she quickly reported it to Jacobo, who instantly deduced who was responsible. Even after this shocking revelation, Jacobo couldn't bring himself to file for divorce. However, Berenice crossed a serious line by targeting his family. He felt he had to take action. Another intense argument followed, but this time Jacobo acted decisively. He consulted with his attorneys and revised his will, removing Berenice from any legal claim to his estate, businesses, stocks, or assets. Despite this, she remained his legal wife, continued to live in his home, and maintained her luxurious lifestyle. Berenice now realized that if anything happened to Jacobo, his children would kick her out of the house and possibly cause her to lose all her money. Unwilling to accept such a fate, she resolved to take charge of the situation. For the next few weeks, she kept a low profile, carefully planning her next steps. She apologized to Jacobo, claiming she regretted her previous actions and wanted to reconcile. She persuaded him that they should meet with his son and daughter, Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr., to have an open discussion and to resolve their issues. To maintain privacy, she suggested holding the meeting at their apartment in the family's private sports complex to avoid interruptions. Jacobo trusted her and saw no reason to be suspicious, so he agreed. He invited his son and daughter, hoping to restore harmony, although Jacobo's daughter, Patricia Quesada, found the location odd. She didn't contest her father's choice. They scheduled the meeting for the evening of the 4th of April. Everyone arrived on time, except Berenice, who was late for no apparent reason. Around 6:00 p.m., Jacobo looked out the window and saw Berenice's car parked in the driveway, but she did not go in immediately. Instead, she told the security guard that there were some urgent matters that needed to be taken care of. Even though this was not within his authority, he did not dare to object and followed her into the practice room. Inside the gym, Berenice pointed out problems with the sound system, insisting that the speakers needed replacement because they weren't working properly. She turned up the volume to make a loud noise and asked the security guard to stand in a certain position to check the sound. The guard was confused by her request, but she made it clear that he was not allowed to leave the room. At one point, she suddenly turned off the sound system, stating a professional technician would need to fix the problems. Without saying anything further, she left the gym. I got into her car and drove away. When the guard returned to his post, he noticed that Jacobo and his children had not left the apartment, even though they had no plans to stay overnight. Concerned, he called them, but there was no answer. He decided to check upstairs to make sure everything was okay. Upon stepping out of the elevator, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The apartment door was wide open, and the first room was in complete disarray, indicating a struggle. As he entered the living room, he saw a horrifying scene. Jacobo and his children were lying lifeless on the floor in a large pool of blood. Panicked, the guard called for emergency services. Although medical personnel arrived promptly, both Jacobo and his son, Jacobo Jr., could not be saved due to the severity of their injuries. But Patricia Quesada still had a weak pulse and was taken to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, she did not survive the trip due to severe blood loss. An autopsy later revealed that all 3 victims had been shot fatally with a high-caliber handgun. Jacobo and Jacobo Jr. had been targeted at close range. While it appeared that Patricia Quesada had attempted to escape but was unable to do so since nothing had been stolen, investigators quickly concluded that this was a targeted attack rather than a random crime. Several theories were considered from the start. Given the Jacobo family's wealth and influence in various sectors, it was plausible that they had powerful enemies. It was possible that Jacobo and his children had been eliminated by business rivals or were caught up in a dangerous conflict. Another theory proposed that they might have been involved in undisclosed dealings linked to illicit activities that led to their deaths. If any of these theories were true, it would explain why Berenice was unharmed. She had no role in the family business, was not involved in any operations, and had recently been removed from Jacobo's will. However, detectives soon suspected she might be hiding something and had the strongest motive. The only eyewitness, the security guard, reported Berenice's strange behavior during his first interview. He described her odd request, the loud music, and how she left without speaking to the family, despite claiming the visit was for that reason. Furthermore, her reaction to the incident raised more suspicions. While she tried to appear upset during questioning, her display of grief seemed unconvincing. Investigators reviewed security footage from the building's entrance, hoping to identify the suspect. Instead, they found that someone had moved the camera to record only a blank wall opposite the entrance. This finding suggested that the crime was planned in advance. A neighbor later told investigators that he had seen a suspicious biker near the building on the night of the incident. The man parked directly in front, entered the building quickly, and left just a few minutes later on his motorcycle. The neighbor described the suspect as a tall, well-built man around 35 years old with a beard and wearing a baseball cap. However, due to the distance and diminishing light, he couldn't see more details. The day after Jacobo's death, Berenice quickly began the process of reclaiming his assets. Despite being newly widowed, she showed little interest in memorial services or informing relatives. Instead, she consulted with lawyers to secure her financial future. Although Jacobo had removed Berenice from his will, she remained his legal wife and was now his sole heir, thus claiming all of his real estate, businesses, and bank accounts. This raised suspicions because it provided a motive for such a crime. Meanwhile, Berenice maintained her lavish lifestyle, attending social events and appearing unaffected by the tragedy. Berenice was often seen at parties and public events with her new partner, a fitness trainer from the sports club owned by Jacobo. Investigators suspected he might be her accomplice or even the one who committed the crime. However, without solid evidence and a witness who could not positively identify him, authorities lacked a strong case for prosecution. Soon, the neighbors noticed Berenice removing valuable items, including antiques and artwork, from Jacobo's estate. Alarmed, they alerted Jacobo's relatives, who then contacted law enforcement to accuse Berenice of plotting the crime for financial gain. 4 days after the incident, Berenice was arrested at the crime scene while trying to lease the sports complex and office building. She even removed police tape to conduct tours for potential tenants. Yet, just 2 days later, she was released by the chief prosecutor, Oscar Tomás Vázquez, who cited procedural errors during her arrest and the lack of an official warrant. Many suspected she had paid for her release. Years later, Vázquez lost his position and was imprisoned for corruption and abuse of power. As investigators worked to strengthen their case for Berenice's rearrest, they faced a new challenge. Her legal team began intimidating witnesses to dissuade them from testifying. In a concerning incident, Jacobo Jr.'s personal assistant was nearly kidnapped outside the prosecutor's office while on her way to testify. Thankfully, security personnel intervened, just in time to ensure her safety. The investigation revealed even more troubling information. Berenice had not only seduced Jacobo Jr., but had also allegedly introduced him to a powerful banned substance, making him dependent. She manipulated him into signing documents that gave her financial control over certain assets and convinced him to transfer money into her accounts. Although Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr. had known Berenice throughout their lives, she never showed them true affection. She quickly lured Jacobo Jr. into danger, using him for money, and eventually murdered both him and Patricia Quesada to eliminate the main heirs who stood in her way. Berenice swiftly liquidated Jacobo's assets. Even though she lacked legal rights to them, she forged documents, bribed officials, and sold 3 luxury cars from Jacobo's exclusive collection. Simultaneously, she fought for legal inheritance rights and even filed a lawsuit to contest the will. When authorities discovered her fraudulent activities, a warrant was issued for her arrest for financial misconduct. However, before the police could act, she disappeared without a trace. In the spring of 2020, investigators located her, but she evaded capture again. As if someone had warned her, she left just 5 minutes before the police arrived. And after that, there were no confirmed sightings of her. There is strong evidence suggesting that she escaped Mexico using fake documents and is now living in another country under a false identity. Although she never officially claimed Jacobo's wealth, she had access to a large amount of cash stored in their home safe, which she took before disappearing. Over the years, Berenice also collected a significant amount of high-end jewelry, including exclusive custom pieces, as well as various luxury items, valuable artwork, and at least 2 cars that she sold before her escape. It's clear she is not facing financial difficulties anytime soon. After 3 years on the run, Berenice Alanis was arrested on July 20, 2022, at a luxury hotel in the popular Mexican resort of Acapulco. The Mexico City Attorney General charged her with masterminding the murders of her husband, Jacobo Quesada, and his 2 sons, Patricia Quesada and Jacobo Jr. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon in Siri, Argentina, when 18-year-old Maria Fernanda Chico left home on her bicycle. She happily told her mother that she was going to meet a friend and would be back later. But as the hours passed, worry started to set in. Her phone was off. She wasn't answering messages. 2 days later, in an abandoned lumberyard, workers stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Maria's lifeless body hidden among stacks of wood, partially covered by her own bicycle. She had been stabbed multiple times in the throat and strangled, the scene showing clear signs of violence. Who could have done this, and why? The truth would come out through a series of messages, a stolen phone, and one eerie social media post, a final clue that would reveal just how far someone was willing to go to get rid of their biggest obsession. Maria Fernanda Chico was born in 1997. In a small town of 20,000 residents in northern Argentina, she was the eldest of 4 siblings, the daughter of Jose Chico, a truck driver, and Silvia Leonardos, who worked at the city's motor vehicle registration office. Friends and family described her as an energetic, lively, and charming person. She had always been active, drawn to outdoor activities and sports. But her true passion was skating. Recognizing her adventurous spirit, her parents signed her up for the Boy Scouts and a small local theater group when she was still a child. It was in that theater group that she met Alina, who would become her lifelong best friend. The 2 girls, both around 11 years old, hit it off immediately. Both were extroverted, full of energy, and always looking for fun. They spent their days pulling pranks, putting on little performances, and sharing secrets that evolved from childhood whispers to adolescent confessions. Maria Fernanda had just celebrated her 14th birthday when she met a young man named Rodrigo. From the very first glance, there was a spark between them, and the attraction was mutual. However, there was one detail that worried those close to her. Rodrigo was 5 years older. Having just turned 19, Maria's parents were immediately concerned about the age difference. Fearing the gap in experience and maturity between a 14-year-old girl and a 19-year-old man, despite their reservations, they eventually gave in, perhaps worried that forbidding the relationship would only push their daughter into secrecy. They allowed Rodrigo to visit their home, hoping to maintain some level of control over the situation. For the next 2 years, their relationship seemed stable. But things took a troubling turn when Rodrigo began secretly dating another girl, Karen Yanez, a fellow student at the same school Maria attended. Incredibly, Karen was only 14 at the time. While Rodrigo was 21, this relationship was not only morally questionable, but also illegal under Argentine law. It didn't take long for Maria to find out. Rodrigo and Karen made no effort to hide their relationship, openly appearing together in the small town and even at school. Heartbroken, Maria struggled with the betrayal, but she was still in love with him and hesitated to end things. However, her parents had seen enough when they discovered Rodrigo's infidelity. They decided to take tough action, forbidding Maria from seeing or communicating with Rodrigo. She was devastated. Eventually, Maria decided to cut ties with Rodrigo. Over time, she seemed to recover from the heartbreak, refocusing her energy on school. After graduating, she started studying film and television at the National University of Cordoba, a decision that excited her, especially since her best friend, Alina, was also studying there. The 2 friends rented a small apartment together in the city, frequently traveling back to Ceres on weekends to visit their families and childhood friends. By February 2015, Maria was 18 years old and eagerly anticipating the long carnival weekend, a 4-day holiday. She and Alina returned to Ceres, looking forward to spending time with loved ones. Their plan was to stay in town from Friday, the 13th of February, until Tuesday, the 17th of February, before heading back to Cordoba to prepare for their final exams in March. On Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, Maria spent time with her family. She surprised her parents and siblings by preparing breakfast for them, bringing it to them in bed along with a bouquet of flowers. A heartfelt gesture that made the day even more special. It was a joyful moment, but none of them knew that it would be one of their last happy memories together. The next day, Sunday, the 15th of February, at about 1 p.m., Maria told her mother she was going to meet a friend and left on her bicycle. This was normal for her, so her family didn't worry. They said goodbye, expecting her home for dinner. When Maria didn't return as the hours passed, her family initially thought she was busy and had forgotten to call. But when they tried calling her, she didn't answer, which was unusual. Then, they called Alina, who said she hadn't seen Maria that day and didn't know her location. Because they were worried, Maria's family sent Maria a text message, but it failed to deliver. Her WhatsApp messages also weren't going through, meaning her phone was likely off or without internet. At that point, they knew something was wrong. Family members quickly gathered upon hearing the news of her disappearance and launched an urgent search. Their first step was filing a missing person report at the nearest police station. Meanwhile, they began searching door to door. During her search, Sylvia came across a familiar face, Karen Yanez. She asked Karen the same question she had asked countless others. "Have you seen Maria today, Karen?" Now 16 years old, denied any knowledge of her whereabouts, insisting that they were not friends and that she had no idea where she might be. The search continued throughout the night, but they found nothing. By 4 a.m. on Monday, the 16th of February, after searching for hours without any leads, hope began to dwindle. The next day passed with a painful silence. There were no new developments, no clues, and no indication of Maria's whereabouts. The truth emerged on Tuesday, the 17th of February, when a grim discovery ended the agonizing wait. Around 8:30 a.m., almost 2 days after Maria was last seen, police received a disturbing call. Lumber company workers had found a body in the company's outdoor storage area. The body was that of a young woman, lying among stacks of wooden posts and partly hidden by a bicycle. Police quickly arrived and recognized the body as matching the description of Maria Fernanda Chico. Her family was informed and their worst fears realized. Forensic experts at the scene observed multiple deep stab wounds, but they also noted apparent signs of asphyxiation. The autopsy later confirmed that she had been strangled with such force that her trachea had been fractured. The stab wounds, inflicted just moments before her death, suggested that had her killer not suffocated her, she might have succumbed to blood loss. Investigators found a barbed wire covered in blood and tissue samples, which were immediately sent for forensic analysis. The results were conclusive. The DNA on the wire matched Maria Fernanda's. The police searched the area thoroughly but didn't find the knife or sharp object used in the stabbing. Forensic analysis showed the attack was extremely violent and came from behind, meaning Maria didn't see her attacker before being stabbed. But who could have committed such a horrific crime? The investigation began with interviews and statements from those closest to Maria. Authorities searched for any indication of conflicts, threats, or enemies. But everyone who knew her described her as a kind-hearted, well-loved young woman with no known disputes. However, when investigators turned their attention to her past relationships, the case took a turn. Both friends and family members admitted they had long suspected that Maria had maintained contact with Rodrigo, the ex-boyfriend from whom she had supposedly separated 2 years earlier. It remained unclear when exactly they had reconnected, but there was a strong indication that her frequent weekend trips back to Ceres weren't solely for family visits. She had also been secretly meeting Rodrigo. Knowing this, the detectives quickly called Rodrigo in for questioning. They understood that in cases of violence against young women, a boyfriend or ex-boyfriend is often a prime suspect. Rodrigo came to the police station that day and identified himself as Maria's ex-boyfriend. He insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance and murder, stating he hadn't seen her at all during the carnival weekend, and he stressed that he would never hurt her. The police pressured Rodrigo to give them his phone so they could read his conversations with Maria. Rodrigo claimed he didn't have the phone anymore, saying he'd lost it on Saturday, the 14th of February. He said he'd even messaged Maria on Facebook that day to tell her he was without a phone. The police confirmed that he had sent the Facebook message. However, Rodrigo's explanation for how he lost the phone seemed suspicious. He suggested that his ex-girlfriend, Karen, had stolen it while he was asleep that Saturday. Karen was the same woman he had cheated on Maria with 2 years prior. Even though Rodrigo insisted he and Karen were no longer together, he admitted he still saw her regularly, just as he still saw Maria. With this new information, investigators checked Maria's phone records and found a message from Rodrigo's number. The message, sent on Sunday, the 15th of February, asked her to meet at the lumberyard where her body was discovered. This suggested two possibilities. Either Rodrigo was lying or someone else. Karen had sent the message using his phone. The investigation into Karen's past revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Witnesses provided new details about her actions towards Maria over the years. These accounts, previously considered unimportant, now appeared significant. Maria's best friend, Alina, testified that Karen had been harassing and stalking Maria for years, stemming from a rivalry over Rodrigo. Karen's actions included verbal insults and physical altercations, such as shoving Maria during school breaks. Their social media activity revealed something disturbing. For years, Karen copied Maria's posts. Whether Maria posted a photo of herself, a place, or food, Karen would post a similar image within hours, seemingly imitating her. At first, the copying was subtle. They wore matching outfits, posed identically in Instagram photos, and used the same filters. But it became clear Karen wasn't just copying Maria's style. She was obsessively mirroring her. When Maria got braces, Karen got them soon after. When Maria grew her hair out, Karen, who always had short hair, suddenly got extensions. They ate the same food, went to the same places, and even acted similarly. Their friends noticed, and eventually, the tension between Maria and Karen led to fights. In the weeks leading up to the murder, the conflict between Karen and Maria became violent. Several weeks prior, they had a fistfight outside a nightclub after a heated argument, and witnesses had to break it up. However, the most concerning event happened just 2 days before Maria's death. On Friday, the 13th of February, Karen almost ran Maria over with her car while Maria was walking down the street with Alina to meet friends. Those close to both girls thought Karen's hatred stemmed from jealousy over Rodrigo. Although Rodrigo claimed to have broken up with Karen, everyone in town knew they were still secretly seeing each other. Karen became even more enraged when she found out Rodrigo was secretly seeing Maria as well. Authorities had reason to investigate Karen before, but a disturbing social media post convinced them to act quickly. Days before Maria's murder, Karen posted a photo on Instagram of the lumberyard where Maria's body was later discovered. The photo's caption said, "This is where it all ends." This new evidence made investigators realize they had to take immediate action. Karen was brought in for questioning early that morning. As she was being interrogated privately at the police station, another team continued searching the crime scene. Karen remained calm and insisted she wasn't involved. However, the search team found conclusive evidence while she was speaking. Near a small canal by the lumberyard, officers discovered a bag containing incriminating items: scissors, a long black hair, a bloody knife, and the cell phones belonging to Maria and Rodrigo. The pieces of the puzzle finally fit together. Karen had stolen Rodrigo's phone, using it to send a message to Maria on the 15th of February. Posing as Rodrigo, she lured Maria to the lumberyard. Once there, she attacked from behind, first using the scissors before switching to the knife to ensure Maria didn't survive. Then, she strangled her with barbed wire, crushing her trachea in the process. After erasing messages from both phones, Karen hid the body among the wooden posts and placed Maria's bicycle on top to further conceal her. Finally, as a sinister trophy, she cut a lock of Maria's hair and fled the scene. Even though all the evidence pointed to Karen, she was let go because there was no clear, This changed when the police got the lumber company's security camera footage a few days later. The video clearly showed Karen dragging Maria's dead body. With this definitive proof, an arrest warrant was immediately issued. The town of Ceres erupted in anger when news of Karen's involvement spread. But what shocked them even more was Karen's online post the day after the murder. Karen had posted another image to Instagram. The caption read, "I really needed to sleep like this." She had slept soundly. The night she murdered Maria, Karen was arrested at a party and, because she was a minor, held in a juvenile detention center for 10 months while awaiting trial. Then, to the community's surprise, on December 23, 2015, a juvenile court judge allowed her to spend the holidays with her family, with the expectation that she'd return to custody by January 12, 2016. Days later, the same judge shocked the community again by granting Karen conditional freedom, meaning she could remain free. As long as she attended weekly psychological counseling sessions, Maria's family and friends were furious because her murderer was not only free, but also there was no trial date, and the prosecutor's office provided almost no information. In 2016, Karen and her family moved from Ceres to Rosario, a bigger city, where she hoped to escape her past. She enrolled in optical technology at the General San Martin Polytechnic Institute, but her fresh start was short-lived. A student at the National Universidad Nacional de Rosario found Karen's name on the admissions list, took a screenshot, and shared it on social media, revealing her past and identifying her as Maria's killer. The viral post sparked an online campaign among students throughout the university. They vowed to deliver justice in the court of public opinion, even if the legal system didn't. As a result, Karen had to leave the program. Afterward, she struggled to stay hidden. Despite changing her social media names repeatedly, she was constantly identified and exposed, no matter what she did. The memory of Maria Fernanda Chico continued to haunt her. By 2017, Karen had managed a small victory. She was admitted to the Universidad Nacional de Rosario to study medicine, a program she pursued for at least a couple of years. However, despite her efforts to live under the radar, her past eventually caught up with her once again. While social condemnation relentlessly pursued her and the judicial process continued to stall, it wasn't until 2020 that a judge finally sentenced Karen Yanez to 7 years in prison for the aggravated murder of Maria Fernanda Chico. Under Argentine law, minors cannot receive the same severe prison sentences as adults. Instead, the punishment must be adjusted according to the legal provisions for attempted crimes rather than completed ones. In this case, the appropriate sentencing range would have been between 10 and 15 years. But when the judge announced that Karen's sentence was only 7 years, below even the minimum threshold, Maria Fernanda's family was furious. Karen's family were determined to get justice and appealed for a longer sentence. However, while they waited, Karen received another benefit. She was accepted into the Provincial Directorate of Juvenile Criminal Justice's Assisted Freedom Program. This program meant she wouldn't have to go to prison. Instead, a special team would supervise her reintegration into society. She would have some restrictions, but she wouldn't be locked up. On February 12, 2022, the Santa Fe Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Chico family, increasing Karen Yanez's prison sentence to 13 years. However, because Karen was already in the Assisted Freedom Program, she would not have to serve any time in prison, which was a disappointing outcome. The Chico family achieved a hollow victory. Although they successfully fought to lengthen the sentence of their daughter's murderer, Karen, she remains free under supervision. Maria Fernanda's parents are still fighting to have Karen imprisoned, but after years of protests, petitions, and legal challenges, she has not served any significant prison time. One seemingly ordinary evening, A mother and her 3 young daughters stopped by a Dollar General store to buy a dress. However, as the store was about to close, a strange man appeared, promising to help. Just hours later, those promises turned into a deadly trap. Cherish Periwinkle disappeared and was brutally murdered. When the truth was revealed, the entire city of Jacksonville was shocked. The pain of a family quickly turned into a nightmare that haunted the entire United States. Who was that man? Why was he still free? Despite his sinful past, and in his fateful final hours, what terrible things really happened to Cherish Periwinkle? These questions left the entire community speechless. But to fully understand this tragedy, we must start with the central character, the innocent girl who became the victim of a terrible tragedy. Cherish Periwinkle, 8 years old, lives with her mother, Rain, and 2 younger sisters, and Na. Born on Christmas Eve in Orlando, Cherish was the greatest gift her mother ever received. After Rain and her father, Billy, separated, there were ongoing custody battles. Despite the struggles, Cherish shone brightly in their lives. She loved animals, enjoyed drawing, and spent hours pretending to teach her sisters. She had just learned to ride her bike and often raced around outside. Full of joy, her father described her as the embodiment of pure love. On the evening of June 21, 2013, Rain took her 3 children to a Dollar General store to find a dress for Cherish before visiting her father in California. This was a difficult time for Rain financially. As she expressed her concerns to a store employee, a man named Donald Smith overheard. He claimed he and his wife had a $150 Walmart gift card and wanted to help the family. Rain was reluctant at first, but Donald spoke softly and kindly, making her feel that he meant well. He reassured her that she and the girls were safe. Trusting him, Rain and her daughters got into his van, which he drove to a Walmart. They spent over an hour shopping, with Donald watching from a distance. While Rain and the girls chose clothes, Donald only selected one troubling item, a length of rope. As the evening went on, the girls grew hungry. Although Rain was ready to leave, Donald insisted they eat at the McDonald's inside the store. He suggested taking Cherish to order food, while Rain stayed with the 2 daughters, Destiny and Na. Though the McDonald's had already closed, Cherish eagerly followed him, and it became the last time Rain saw her daughter alive. When the Dollar General store began to close, panic set in for Rain. She frantically searched for Cherish and Donald but found no sign of them. Her phone was unusable, and she called for help. Nearly 40 minutes passed before a store employee provided her with a phone to contact 911. The police initially treated the situation as a missing child case rather than an abduction. However, security footage soon revealed Donald leaving the store with Cherish, walking calmly to his white van and driving away. An alert was issued shortly before midnight, identifying the vehicle as a white Dodge van with white curtains. By 3:30 a.m., the name Donald Smith emerged. He was a convicted offender who had been released from prison just 3 weeks earlier. With a long history of disturbing offenses dating back to 1977, the urgency escalated, and homicide detectives were called in. At 4 a.m., the Florida Department of Law Enforcement issued an Amber Alert. At dawn, a tip came in about a suspicious white van spotted behind a church. When officers located the van, they found Donald alone and soaking wet, with items from Walmart inside. K-9 units were deployed, and a police officer sensed something was amiss with Donald, prompting them to search the nearby water. Just 20 minutes later, behind the church, they discovered Cherish's body near a creek, partially submerged. Her hair floated in the water, and her bright floral dress lay nearby. She had been brutally assaulted and murdered. Donald was arrested and brought in for questioning, but displayed no emotion or remorse, refusing to answer any questions. His criminal history included offenses against children, assaults, attempted kidnappings, and manipulations. Given his previous crimes involving children, Donald should not have been released. However, he slipped through the net And the price for that was Cherish's life. Donald Smith had been flagged as a serious threat since 1999, just before completing another prison sentence. Both state officials and psychiatric evaluators viewed him as high risk and conveyed that releasing him would be unsafe. Donald was sent to a civil commitment facility near Tampa, but the system ultimately failed. A jury never saw the warnings, and he was allowed to go free. In the years that followed, Donald continued to target young girls, and the danger he posed was real. In 2009, he impersonated a state social worker in an attempt to gain access to a girl named Christina. He even made inappropriate phone calls to her when she was just 10 years old. Although he was charged and pleaded guilty to misdemeanors, he received a short 14-month sentence. Because his offenses were not felonies, he was never re-evaluated as a threat. His file remained open, but there were no serious warnings that could have stopped him. Christina's mother, Stephanie, never forgot him, calling him sick and evil, and believing he should never be free. When Cherish was killed just 3 weeks after Donald's release, the public outrage grew. Then came the autopsy, revealing the shocking details of Cherish's death. She suffered severe head injuries, was gagged, and strangled so violently that her eyes bled. The brutality was unimaginable. When Rain learned these details, she collapsed and needed medical assistance. Donald Smith was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and assault of a child under 12. The entire city of Jacksonville was affected by the case. Hundreds attended Cherish's funeral, and community members provided support to her family. Nearly 2,000 people signed her guest book, deeply moved by her story, even though they had never met her. For Rain, the grief was both personal and public. She felt deceived by a man who had seemed to help her family. This trust was shattered in the worst possible way, compounding her sorrow. Just weeks after the funeral, the state removed her 2 youngest daughters, Destiny and Na, from her care due to an investigation by the Department of Children and Families. Suddenly, she was not only mourning Cherish, but also fighting for custody of her surviving children. A judge required her to take a test for banned substances, which she completed. Although her visitation rights were temporarily revoked, they were later reinstated, allowing her to see her daughters for 2 hours every Monday with supervision. However, the fear of losing them permanently loomed over her. Aaron Pearson, the father of Destiny and Na, was determined to regain custody. He publicly expressed his love for the girls and promised to keep them in touch with Rain. He understood the system required assurance before any reunification could happen. Contrarily, a social worker named Amy Deckers offered her home for the girls' temporary placement and began managing a Facebook page to advocate for their adoption. This made Rain feel betrayed, especially since Amy had once been her friend. Amy, however, insisted she had not worked with Rain for a long time, leading to increasing tension between them. Meanwhile, in Yale, Donald Smith remained quiet with law enforcement, but secretly, he talked to his mother, denying all accusations. He claimed Walmart had too many cameras to support the allegations against him. His statements were erratic. He contradicted himself and shifted blame. At one point, he claimed Cherish wouldn't leave him alone and insisted he wasn't attracted to children. Yet, he confessed to being high and drunk the night he met Rain and described a chaotic scene inside his van. He admitted he panicked when Cherish followed him and chillingly stated that he thought the only way out was to kill her. Donald struggled to maintain control over his narrative, at times sounding like a man unraveling. It was clear he was trapped by his own guilt. Revealing the burden of his secrets, Donald asked his mother for a basic book on psychiatric disorders, believing that pursuing a mental health defense was his best option in the legal system, rather than showing real remorse. However, more incriminating evidence emerged. Secret recordings of his conversations with other inmates exposed his true nature. He didn't merely discuss young girls. He joked about them and described them in a deeply disturbing manner, mentioning their ages with a callousness that revealed his predatory instincts. This wasn't the language of someone claiming insanity. It was the mindset of a fully aware predator. Donald maintained a not guilty plea, with his defense team arguing that the media coverage had biased the public against him, portraying him as a monster. They requested a change of trial venue, which was denied. As time passed, Donald's trial faced continuous delays due to legal challenges surrounding Florida's death penalty law. Meanwhile, Rain Periwinkle's life fell apart. In 2017, the state announced that she had not met the requirements to regain custody of her surviving daughters, Destiny and Na. They were put up for adoption and moved to Australia to live with their aunt. The girls were starting a new life far away. While Rain felt this loss acutely, she claimed she had fought for her daughters but felt excluded from the process. Rain believed her sister had only married to gain custody of the girls, and she hadn't spoken to her in years. The state maintained that Rain had been given a fair chance to prove herself but failed to do so. The last time she saw her daughters was during a brief supervised visit in March, where she promised to keep fighting for them. Billy, Cherish's father, had long been separated from Rain. Their relationship was complicated by custody disputes. After Cherish's death, he chose not to pursue legal action against Rain. Even though his attorney felt she bore some responsibility, Billy preferred to focus on moving forward. Meanwhile, Rain struggled to find work as her name became synonymous with tragedy. She claimed employers were unwilling to hire her, blaming her for the events surrounding Cherish's death. In addition to her public grief, she faced battles with depression and isolation. However, in early 2018, the trial finally commenced. Donald Smith stood trial for the murder of Cherish Periwinkle, capturing the attention of the public. The prosecution presented a true and harrowing account of Cherish's final moments. The girl spent her last hours in fear, dying slowly and painfully at the hands of a cold-blooded man. Rain was the prosecution's first witness. She described the night of Cherish's disappearance, detailing the dress, shopping, her hesitations, and the van. She recounted how Donald had offered to buy the dress and grew impatient when she hesitated. She shared the panic she felt when she realized her daughter was missing, expressing regret for not acting sooner. Then came the hardest question. When Cherish followed Donald toward McDonald's, "Was that the last time you saw her alive?" Rain nodded, forever haunted by the image of her daughter, skipping after the man who would take her life. The defense countered by blaming Rain's choices, arguing that she was the one who allowed her daughter to get into the van. They painted her as irresponsible, suggesting that she, alongside Donald, was responsible for what happened. It was an emotionally charged moment that resonated deeply in the courtroom. Rain had testified, and the prosecution had made a compelling case with compelling evidence. But in a surprising move, Donald instructed his legal team not to cross-examine Rain, stating that she had endured enough. To many, this was not an act of compassion, but a calculated decision. Throughout the trial, 12 witnesses testified. This included the officer who arrested Donald, the tipster who identified his van, and a Communist 9 officer whose intuition led the police to Cherish's body. He recounted walking through underbrush, over tire tracks, past a fallen tree, and discovering Cherish's small body lying beneath it, her hair floating just below the surface. The state also called the medical examiner who conducted Cherish's autopsy, who presented 26 heartbreaking photos to the jury. The injuries were so severe that she had to pause her testimony. The courtroom took a 10-minute break, but the horrific details lingered. Upon her return, she detailed the injuries: blunt force trauma to the scalp and severe strangulation marks that required careful examination. The emotional weight filled the room, visibly shaking the jury as they faced the undeniable reality. Donald's defense did not present any evidence, witnesses, or closing statements, which many perceived as a silent acknowledgement of guilt. When the jury reconvened, they deliberated for just 19 minutes before delivering a unanimous verdict. Donald Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping a victim under 13, and assaulting a person under 12. They determined that the murder was premeditated and part of a felony, leaving new doubts. During the sentencing phase, further testimony revealed that Donald had a history of dangerous behavior. A woman named Carrie Ann testified that he had attempted to abduct her when she was just 13 years old. She recalled hiding in a closet, terrified he would find her, while he yelled threatening insults outside. Though she survived, the trauma remained with her. Weighing the severity of the crime and the past, the jury made their decision. Once again, they chose the death penalty for Rain and Billy. This brought a sense of justice, though not peace, as no sentence could restore what was lost. Rain stood outside the courthouse and expressed the collective sentiment that predators like Donald should never be given the opportunity to commit such crimes again, calling for systemic changes. However, not everyone supported the death penalty. Outside the courtroom, protesters gathered, with anti-death penalty activists holding signs and chanting. Jurors also shared their thoughts. One mentioned that the trial's images would haunt them forever, while another revealed that 4 jurors had initially considered a life sentence. Ultimately, they all agreed that Donald Smith should not remain in society. The story did not end there. In 2021, Donald filed an appeal, which was unanimously rejected by the Florida Supreme Court due to the overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Then, in 2023, nearly 10 years after Cherish's death, the case returned to court. Donald's new legal team claimed his original attorneys had been ineffective. They argued that the jury selection was flawed, that a potential juror may have had biases, and that Donald should have been advised to accept a plea bargain. The court reviewed these claims and, in May 2024, the judge delivered a final ruling. No new trial would be granted. Donald Smith remained on death row. Cherish Periwinkle's case is a heartbreaking example of the failures in protecting innocent children from predators. Her name will not be forgotten. Some individuals are extremely cruel, exhibiting bloodlust and pleasure in inflicting pain, traits rarely seen even in animals. This extreme cruelty can consume their minds, making it difficult for them to recognize their humanity. One day, in the middle of the night, a house was engulfed in flames. Firefighters rushed in, and what they discovered was horrifying. A body so burned that the gender could not be determined, with a kitchen knife stuck in its face. This is not just a murder case, but a tragedy of kindness betrayed, a testament to the horrifying cruelty of some people. On March 24, 2006, a resident of Louisville, Kentucky, called 911 to report a house fire on Harlan Street. Several neighbors watched in horror as the flames devoured the wooden structure. They prayed for the firefighters to arrive quickly. Fearing the fire would spread, the incident occurred around midnight, and rescuers immediately responded. The firefighters battled the raging blaze, taking nearly 45 minutes to bring it under control. Afterwards, they began searching for the fire's source. However, they found something horrible: a dead body. The fire department immediately called forensic experts and detectives. By this time, the house was almost half destroyed by the fire, and everything inside was smoke-filled, making it difficult to breathe or begin work. In the bedroom, police found the victim's body lying face up. The fire had so severely damaged it that even the gender couldn't be determined without an examination. However, some things were immediately obvious. Suspicions of accidental death were quickly dismissed as the victim had been stabbed in the face with a knife. Forensic experts were astounded because sticking a knife into someone's face requires significant force. This was a unique case for everyone involved, speaking volumes about the extreme cruelty involved. It was clearly a murder. The fire had obviously started in the bedroom where the body was found. The attacker wasn't just trying to kill his victim, he clearly wanted to destroy all evidence. No identification documents were found. All photographs and documents had burned. Detectives checked the mailbox outside, but found it empty. The remains were prepared to be sent to the laboratory. When the forensic expert removed the bladed weapon from the deceased's face, it turned out to be a regular kitchen knife. Not a hunting weapon or a combat tool. It was assumed that the knife had been taken from the victim's kitchen. This immediately ruled out the possibility of a break-in or robbery gone wrong. Everything suggested the murder was committed in a fit of rage, perhaps driven by jealousy or revenge. Given the absence of forced entry, it was definitely someone the victim knew. The police began interviewing everyone who lived near the scene. When the fire brigade arrived, many people came out onto the street to see what was happening. Among them was Daryl Benzel, who was standing next to the woman who had called 911 that night. Daryl clearly had some connection to the house. When asked if he knew who might be inside, Daryl confidently said it could be the tenant, a 40-year-old man named Charles Eddie Pointer. It was discovered that the deceased was originally from the Catholic community of Edmonton, Kentucky. He had been married and had a daughter, but, after a divorce, decided to start a new life in Louisville in the late 90s. He looked for a job, built a career, and perhaps started a family. Initially, adapting to the new community proved difficult, and Eddie developed an alcohol addiction. Despite this, he remained a calm and polite person, simply trying to find his place in life. In the new place, Eddie found a job and resolved to get his life back on track. It wasn't easy, but he sincerely believed he was on the path to recovery. Seeking understanding and support, he joined Alcoholics Anonymous. It was here that he finally found what he had been looking for: a community of people with similar problems actively supporting each other. He made new friends within the group and dedicated himself to changing his life. When Eddie needed to find new housing, he met Daryl Benzel. By this time, he had been sober for several months. Eddie hoped to secure housing and continue building his new life, and this acquaintance seemed perfectly timed. Eddie fit in well with the local community, and the landlord was very pleased with the new tenant. Eddie was friendly and caused no problems. Unfortunately, this peaceful period lasted only 8 months. And then, Eddie's body was found in a burned-down house, a knife impaled in his face, driven into the hilt. Only after many hours of inspecting the scene did the forensic scientist discover a partially burnt notebook among the ashes. On one page were several entries, including the name Jennifer Smith. Though the phone number was illegible, this name was common, making it difficult for detectives to check every Jennifer Smith. Furthermore, it was unclear in which direction to focus the investigation. The notebook appeared to be the only potential lead from the house. As everything else was destroyed, no fingerprints or other traces were found, not even on the knife handle. Naturally, investigators began by examining Eddie's immediate circle and located the Jennifer Smith, who was mentioned in the notebook. An unlikely connection emerged, given the 20-year age difference between them. From the outset, something felt amiss. They attempted to contact Jennifer, but she was out of town. Eddie's relatives were notified, a necessary step to gather information about his life and relationships. There was a critical lack of information. For Eddie's parents, this news was devastating. She insisted he had no mental illness and had always avoided criminals. She mentioned his many friends, particularly those from Alcoholics Anonymous, suggesting a possible lead. Initially, the murder appeared to be the result of a failed romance or a love triangle. However, upon closer examination of Eddie's acquaintances, it became clear they didn't fit the profile of brutal criminals. They shared similar characteristics and mentalities with Eddie, a close-knit and supportive group of people. The idea that any of them would commit such a violent act seemed impossible. Meanwhile, the autopsy revealed numerous stab wounds on Eddie's face and body. Given the severity of the burns, even a simple count was difficult. It was obvious that the attack was particularly cruel. With dozens of blows inflicted mainly on the upper body and neck, many defensive wounds were found on his hands, suggesting a long and fierce struggle for his life. Judging by the burn patterns, the fire likely started around the body, or Eddie was set on fire. Rumors about the tragic death were spreading among neighbors. The image of the crime scene was horrifying. The local community was alarmed because Eddie lived in one of the safest areas of the city. Many families with children were now afraid to leave their homes. People put pressure on the police, demanding that the streets be made safe. When Eddie's friends heard about the murder, they also went to the police station, hoping to help find the killer. They were all shocked by the brutality of the attack and the choice of victim. No one among the witnesses could identify a motive for such a death. Eddie didn't seem like someone who would deserve such a fate. The situation changed somewhat when the police received a call from Perry, the deceased's friend. According to Perry, in the last months of his life, Eddie regularly visited small bars near downtown Louisville. He had started drinking more and usually had a good time. Perry also said that during this period, Eddie wasn't in a committed relationship, but he maintained a large circle of close friends. Everyone loved him. So Perry couldn't suggest a likely suspect, but he knew a person who could potentially help the police, which was an elderly man named Blaine Thacker. Both worked in restaurants. The age difference between them was 30 years. And despite the age gap, they quickly became close friends. Perry suggested that if the police wanted valuable information, they should talk to Blaine, as he was Eddie's closest friend at the time of his death. Shortly before these events, Blaine had moved to an apartment building in Louisville. However, Perry didn't have Blaine's phone number or exact address, making it difficult to contact Blaine. Perry promised to ask Eddie's other friends to find out this information. At the time, Blaine's current place of work was also unknown, so detectives decided to start by trying to find that out. As it turned out, Blaine worked as a chef for a catering company. He is described as hot-tempered with his employees but also caring. People spoke very highly of him, describing him as a hard worker, professional, and a good-natured elderly man. He was reliable and always arrived at the restaurant first, around 4 a.m., and immediately began preparing for the kitchen's opening. However, after the tragic fire, Blaine suddenly disappeared and stopped showing up for work. No one could reach him. This seemed strange, as Blaine's reputation was impeccable. He was so punctual that everyone assumed he had a good reason for his absence. His absence the following day heightened suspicions, leading his colleagues to fear the worst. When the detectives learned this information, they were extremely worried. Eddie had been found stabbed to death in a burnt-out house, and Blaine hadn't shown up for work for 2 days. This could mean two things: either Blaine was involved in the crime and was on the run, or he was another victim of a brutal killer. Unfortunately, no one at the restaurant knew where his new apartment was located, so the search reached another dead end. Unexpectedly, just a few days after the crime, a suspicious car appeared near the burnt house. Forensic experts were still working at the scene when they saw a car pull into the driveway. The driver watched what was happening for some time and attracted attention, then even tried to enter the house, claiming he wanted to find his friend, Dale Moneypenny. An unexpected witness came forward, reporting that on the day of the murder, he had seen Dale covered in blood, accompanied by a girl who was also bloodied and appeared frightened. Now, seeing the house burnt down and surrounded by police tape, the witness suspected Dale's involvement. He didn't know the girl with Dale, but was certain the couple had been in the house for at least several days before the arson. Following this information, the search for Blaine Thacker was suspended. Detectives prioritized the new lead and began searching for Dale and his mysterious companion, who automatically became prime suspects in the brutal massacre and arson. Information on Dale was scarce, but records showed prior convictions. He was described as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes. Born in Schlen, Kent, he drove a black Honda, the license plate of which investigators were able to obtain, greatly simplifying the search. A warning was issued to all city law enforcement agencies, instructing them to track down Dale's vehicle. City residents were also notified through the media about the potential danger he posed. The public was asked to report any sightings of the black Honda or Dale himself to the police. However, this didn't immediately boost the investigation. Dale had served several years in prison, a significant term considering he was barely 20 at the time of the events. His crimes included violent offenses, but most were robberies. He frequently broke into houses and sold the stolen goods, living off the proceeds. He also faced several charges for illegal substance use. Seeking the primary suspect, detectives turned to Dale's family. Relatives stated they hadn't seen him in a long time, but none were surprised the police were looking for him. Dale had always been a troublemaker, constantly facing problems with the law. His downward spiral began after the tragic murder of his mother during his teenage years. He took the loss very hard, withdrawing and becoming cruel. Dale's mother was a single mother, so her death left him to fend for himself. During this period, he became addicted to partying and became somewhat of a ladies' man, easily finding new acquaintances, including women. Despite his illegal activities due to his charm, Dale's criminal history was significantly influenced by his upbringing, which involved marginalization, alcohol, and banned substance use. His problems were worsened by his quick temper and inability to take no for an answer, especially when he was drinking or using banned substance. He was first imprisoned in $2,000. After his release, he moved to Louisville to be with a woman he had met. Relatives of Dale criminal provided police with photographs of him and helped them identify his girlfriend Jennifer Smith. This was the same name found in Eddie's notebook. Investigators located Jennifer's address and immediately arrived, but found only her mother. The mother stated she hadn't seen her daughter in a long time. She'd seen news reports about Jennifer's boyfriend being in trouble and knew the police would be looking for Jennifer. At the time, Jennifer was 23 years old and in college. She and Dale did not have a fixed residence but frequently moved between rented apartments and motels. Jennifer's mother confirmed that Jennifer was dating Dale. She'd observed their strong attachment. After Eddie's massacre, both had disappeared. Mother was sure they weren't in the city. She was deeply worried about Jennifer's fate and promised to report any information she received, begging the police not to harm her daughter, believing she might also be a victim of a dangerous criminal. Despite the search, no trace of Dale and Jennifer. Sometime after the visit to Jennifer's house, the police station received another call. Jennifer had returned home and wanted to speak to the detectives. Within minutes, investigators were at her doorstep. From the beginning of the meeting, it was obvious that something was troubling her. After a little pressure, she began to tell the truth. Jennifer claimed that Dale was responsible for Eddie's death, but he wasn't the only victim. She knew that Dale had also killed another man named Blaine and provided his address. While Jennifer was being transported to the station to continue the interrogation, a police squad was sent to Blaine's apartment. Law enforcement officers gained access through the building's owner. Inside the bedroom, they found the body of a 70-year-old man on the bed. He had multiple stab wounds, primarily to the chest and torso. The murder weapon was an ordinary kitchen knife, just as in Eddie's case, demonstrating the criminal's similar bloody methods. Unlike the previous crime scene, there was no arson. However, the apartment was ransacked, and valuables were clearly stolen. The murder weapon was found on the bed near the body. The knife was sent for forensic analysis, and experts were able to find fingerprints on the handle. These fingerprints matched Dale in the database, leaving no doubt that the criminal was continuing his activity. Meanwhile, at the station, Jennifer was being interrogated. According to her confession, she hadn't realized how dangerous Dale was when they first met. She met him through mutual friends at a party and was immediately attracted to him. By the time of his arrest, they had only known each other for 2 weeks. He seemed charismatic and attractive, and he knew how to behave in society. Initially, his image was very positive. During the week they dated, Jennifer was happy, even though the couple was essentially homeless, moving from place to place. Her mother had kicked them out because she disapproved of their lifestyle. As they spent all their free time in bars, during another party at a bar, they met Eddie and his friend Blaine. Both men were very friendly and, after hearing the couple's story, Eddie offered to let them stay at his place. He was proud of himself for overcoming his addiction to alcohol, which he attributed to the help he received from Alcoholics Anonymous. Eddie felt a need to help others. He understood Jennifer and Dale's housing difficulties. Unfortunately, his kindness would end with a knife in his face. According to Jennifer, they lived with Eddie for several days. On the night of the murder, Dale was clearly being abuse-aggressive in the bedroom. Eddie caught them and was angered by their brazenness. An argument began, and Jennifer immediately left the room. At some point, Dale ran out. Slamming the door, he rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and returned to Eddie. A few minutes later, he came out covered in blood and told Jennifer that they needed to leave immediately. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. Jennifer was in shock, and he apparently stained her clothes with the victim's blood at that moment. After a brief thought, Dale committed arson in the bedroom. Dale and Jennifer grabbed their things and ran away. About 45 minutes passed from the moment of the murder to their escape. Later, they got rid of those bloody clothes. Jennifer claimed she didn't participate in the crime and couldn't have stopped Dale with words. She was even afraid to enter the bedroom after the murder. She was so scared that she didn't even think to call an ambulance, especially given her shock and the uncertainty of how Dale would react. Jennifer was forced to obey Dale and help him cover his tracks. Now, Dale and Jennifer needed a place to spend the night. They went to Blaine's apartment, as Dale had his address and had offered help if needed. Of course, they didn't tell Blaine about the murder. They changed clothes, took showers, and tried to appear presentable. Jennifer claimed she was so exhausted that she fell asleep on the couch around 4:30 a.m. When she woke up, she saw Dale, her boyfriend, emerge from Blaine's bedroom, covered in blood again. She was afraid to ask Dale about what had happened. He ordered her to gather everything of value, after which they fled. Detectives found it strange that Jennifer was so insistent on justifying herself from both murders. Her attempts seemed clumsy and overly obvious. She tried to point out that all this happened without her participation against this background. It seemed strange why she did not try to escape from Dale and go to the police. Given all of this, it seemed odd that she hadn't tried to escape Dale and go to the police immediately after the first murder, but instead continued to obediently follow him. When questioned about this, she cited fear and shock, but her explanations sounded unconvincing. Investigators believed she was lying and must have been involved in the crimes. Jennifer had more than enough opportunities to escape Dale and call for help. Notably, they were captured on some city surveillance footage, where they both appeared completely calm, like a couple in love. Evidence clearly did not show that Dale was forcing Jennifer to follow him. She appeared to do everything voluntarily. According to Dale, after escaping from Blaine's house, they stayed in Indiana at the home of a friend of his. Jennifer intended to flee, but he ordered her to return her home. Dale promised to contact her later. After Jennifer's confession, she was charged with 2 murders: robbery, arson, and tampering with evidence. Now, investigators are focused on finding Dale. The only thing Jennifer knew was that he had always dreamed of going to Miami, so he was most likely heading toward Florida. Louisville law enforcement contacted the Miami Police Department, reporting that a dangerous criminal was moving in their direction and that an arrest warrant had already been issued. Most of all, police were afraid that he would kill someone else. The dangerous criminal remained at large for more than 2 weeks. He was never found. A tip from Jennifer suggested he might have been lying on purpose to mislead the police. The killer, who had brutally dealt with 2 men, could have been anywhere. He was, of course, considered especially dangerous because he was ready to do anything to remain free. Finally, on the 16th of April, Miami law enforcement contacted detectives and reported that Dale had been arrested. He was apprehended in a stolen car. It was established that on the 30th of March, he had stopped at a bar in Daytona Beach, where he talked at length with a 75-year-old man. Dale was likely preying on elderly, gullible people, using his charm. This time, he persuaded the stranger to rent a hotel room. Once inside, he took out a knife and, out of old habit, pointed it at the man. However, this time he did not kill the man, as the victim offered no resistance and immediately surrendered his wallet and car keys. Dale left. Hotel staff witnessed him leaving the building and then attempting to open several different cars until he found the correct vehicle. As soon as the criminal left, the hotel staff helped the victim and called the police. Miami police immediately recognized the suspect. They had been tracking him for a long time. Based on a tip from colleagues in Louisville, he was located on the city's surveillance cameras and detained. Following his arrest, the killer was sent to Louisville. Dale willingly agreed to cooperate with the investigation. He admitted that when Eddie tried to evict him from his house, un argument su, at some point, he lost control, grabbed a knife, and killed Eddie. He then realized he needed to cover his tracks. Together with Jennifer, he took the most valuable items from the house and then committed arson. Afterward, they went to Blaine's house, who quickly began to suspect that something was wrong. Therefore, Dale decided to kill Blaine to prevent him from turning them in to the authorities and eliminating any traces. He used the same method, taking a knife and stabbing Blaine. After that, he and Jennifer robbed the victim again, and the couple fled. Dale immediately took the blame and admitted that he was fully responsible for both massacres. According to him, Jennifer was merely an accomplice and did not participate in the killings. However, Jennifer followed the killer of her own free will. Dale Moneypenny was immediately charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder and arson. He faced the death penalty. In order to avoid it, he made a deal with the prosecution. As a result, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On September 30, 2008, Jennifer Smith pleaded guilty to complicity in double murder and arson, for which she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She served 5 years and was released on parole in 2011 at the age of 29. People described as psychopaths commonly have antisocial personality disorder, which means they typically cannot feel remorse, guilt, empathy, or compassion. They are skilled at mimicking emotions to appear normal. They are patient and wait for the ideal moment to take advantage of others, often hurting others for personal gain. Countering their schemes is difficult because they use manipulation, deception to lure victims, control them, and ultimately harm them. The following story is an example of this horrific abuse. A young girl believes in love, believes in sweet promises, and ends up paying the price with her own life and her child, who is only a few days away from being born. In 2006, the case of Jennifer Zacconi horrified Italy, becoming one of the country's most shocking criminal cases. Jennifer was born on February 19, 1984, in Martellago, a small town in the province of Venezia. She was the only child of a modest family. Her mother was a homemaker, and her father worked in a factory. Her parents loved her very much and raised her in a loving and trusting home. Jennifer was a cheerful, outgoing, and sociable girl who easily made friends and was always the life of the party. Jennifer grew up in a small town with limited options for young people. Most local youth spent their time at the few bars or the single nightclub. Jennifer and her friends often went to a popular bar in the town center. In 2003, she met Lucio Niero, the bar owner and bartender. Lucio, almost 13 years older than Jennifer, was immediately drawn to her and began paying her attention. Their brief encounters soon became more serious. Jennifer felt flattered by the older man's interest. Lucio complimented her, bought her drinks, drove her home, and gave her expensive presents. Jennifer told her friends that she initially didn't like Lucio, but his charm eventually won her over. Several months later, Lucio and Jennifer started dating. Their relationship moved quickly, but it was complicated. Lucio confessed early on that he was married with 2 young children. However, he misrepresented his marriage, claiming he was unhappy. He told Jennifer he didn't love his wife anymore but couldn't leave because of his children. Lucio often told Jennifer how terrible his home life was, saying he only felt happy with her and that his home life was a nightmare. Jennifer believed him and felt sorry for him. She listened carefully to his stories, even started to dislike his wife, who Lucio described as cruel, selfish, greedy, and dishonest. He stated that his wife was only after his money. He also expressed concern for his children, saying they would be devastated by a divorce. Lucio promised Jennifer he would talk to his wife, resolve their issues, and get a divorce, so he and Jennifer could be together. He sounded so sincere that Jennifer introduced him to her parents. Jennifer told her mother about Lucio's troubled marriage. Initially, her mother was worried, but Jennifer convinced her that Lucio was genuine and would follow through on his promises. Seeing Jennifer's happiness with Lucio, her mother reluctantly accepted the relationship, hoping he would eventually marry her daughter. Lucio became a regular and well-liked guest at the Zacconis' house, almost like family. Lucio and Jennifer were together for roughly a year and a half. Throughout their relationship, Lucio consistently told Jennifer he was about to divorce his wife so they could be together. However, despite his complaints about his marriage, he never planned to leave his family. Lucio liked having a double life. Keeping Jennifer around boosted his self-esteem, made his life more thrilling, and made him feel important. In July 2005, Jennifer was surprised to find out she was pregnant. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt it was meant to be. She hoped the pregnancy would push Lucio to finally leave his wife, get a divorce, and marry her, like they had discussed. A few days later, Jennifer told Lucio during one of their regular hotel meetings that she was pregnant. Lucio was definitely the father. He couldn't accuse her of cheating. He reacted instantly, his face changing, and he fell silent before demanding she get an abortion right away. Things didn't go as expected. Jennifer was shocked by what she was hearing. She initially thought Lucio was kidding, but when she asked him to explain, he exploded in anger. He grabbed her shoulders, shook her hard, and yelled at her to solve the issue at once. Jennifer was scared. She had never seen Lucio behave like this. He seemed on the verge of hitting her, and he actually was fighting the urge to do so. He paced back and forth, repeatedly demanding to know who else knew about the pregnancy. They couldn't talk calmly that day. They argued intensely and then left, going their separate ways. Jennifer wasn't too bothered by Lucio's reaction. She thought, perhaps too optimistically, that he just needed time to understand and accept things before making the correct choice. So, she decided not to push him and didn't call him for several days after their argument. But finally, she couldn't resist and called him first. Lucio believed Jennifer had ended the pregnancy and expected their relationship to return to normal. He immediately asked if she had taken care of it. When Jennifer said she hadn't, he became furious. He yelled at her over the phone, accusing her of ruining his life. They were unable to have a peaceful discussion. Jennifer realized he hadn't changed his mind and decided to have the baby, regardless of whether he supported her or not. As time went on, Lucio and Jennifer saw each other less often. They rarely spoke, and when they did, it usually led to angry fights. Lucio's wife still didn't know about the affair or that Jennifer was pregnant. Lucio acted like a loving husband and father, hiding his affair while also pushing Jennifer to get an abortion. Jennifer's parents supported her decision to keep the baby, reassuring her that they would help raise the child, even if the father never came around. Deep down, however, they hoped Lucio would eventually take responsibility, acknowledge the child, and marry Jennifer as he had promised. For several months, Lucio avoided any contact with his pregnant lover. During this time, Jennifer had come to terms with the idea of becoming a single mother. She tried to stay positive and actively prepared for the baby's arrival. She already knew she was expecting a boy and had even chosen a name for him, Heaven. By the spring of 2006, Jennifer Zacconi had everything ready for her baby. Her parents helped her create a nursery with a crib, stroller, blankets, and baby clothes. She had sent Lucio, the baby's father, ultrasound photos and messages, but he never replied. Even though he didn't respond, Jennifer tried to be patient. She hoped he would eventually come to terms with the situation and choose to be with her and their son every day. She checked her phone and email, hoping to hear from him. At the end of April 2006, Jennifer received a surprising phone call from Lucio. He inquired about her well-being and said they needed to meet to discuss something important. His demeanor was calm, and his voice was gentle, a change from how he'd been for months. For the first time since she told him about the pregnancy, Lucio seemed genuinely kind and sincere. He gave her the impression that he truly wanted to have a serious conversation. This filled Jennifer with hope. She believed Lucio had finally chosen her and their child, decided to leave his marriage, and was going to propose to her at their meeting. Jennifer told her mother what she thought. Her mother shared her positive outlook. Jennifer's mother believed Lucio was grown up and reliable. She thought he would make a good husband and father. Even though things had been difficult, she would have been happy to accept him into their family. Lucio and Jennifer planned to meet on the evening of the 29th of April, 2006 for a walk in the park. Jennifer found it strange that Lucio hadn't suggested a cafe or hotel like he usually did, but she was so excited to see him that she dismissed it. Her baby was due in less than a week, and she still hoped Lucio would be the child's father. The evening before their meeting, Lucio called Jennifer again to confirm the details. He told her he would wait for her in the parking lot of a small shop about half a kilometer from her home. The area became nearly deserted in the evenings, but this didn't raise any alarms for Jennifer. She felt no sense of danger. Jennifer meticulously prepared for the meeting, wanting to make a good impression on Lucio. She dressed up, styled her hair, and carefully applied her makeup. She spent almost an hour choosing the perfect dress, taking a small purse with her phone, mints, and €5. She went to the parking lot and waited for Lucio. He arrived around 8:00 p.m. in a car Jennifer didn't recognize, assuming he'd bought a new car since they last saw each other. She didn't question it. Lucio suggested getting ice cream at a nearby gas station, and Jennifer, trusting him, got into the car without hesitation. 2 hours later, Jennifer's mother began to worry and decided to call her daughter. To her dismay, Jennifer's phone was turned off. Her anxiety grew. By midnight, she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the phone rang, but it wasn't Jennifer. It was Lucio. Lucio calmly asked if Jennifer had made it home yet. He said they met, talked, walked in the park, and he dropped her off in the parking lot of a store near her house. When Jennifer's mother told him that she hadn't returned home, Lucio feigned concern and panic. He said he would call back later, but couldn't search for her right away because he had urgent matters to attend to. After this, he hung up and never called back. Jennifer's parents were terrified when she didn't come home. They called all her friends, thinking she might have gotten caught up with someone and lost track of time. But none of her friends had seen her that night or knew where she was. Around 1:00 a.m., they received a text message from Jennifer's phone. It said she was with friends at a casino in Slovenia, a place she had been before. The message told them not to worry and that she would be home in a day. Jennifer's mother immediately tried to call her, but the phone was off. She then realized someone else must have sent the text. Even though the casino was only a 2-hour drive from their town near the Italian border, Jennifer couldn't have gone there. She had no money. And, more importantly, she did not have her passport with her, which she needed to enter Slovenia. Jennifer's parents worried she had been kidnapped and that Lucio was involved. They couldn't understand why he would do this or where Jennifer could be. They immediately reported her missing to the police because Jennifer was heavily pregnant and about to give birth. The police began investigating right away. They first checked for any accidents or emergencies reported in the area. Jennifer's mother told the police about Lucio's suspicious behavior and that he was the father of the child and the last person to see her. Lucio became the main suspect. Lucio was brought in for questioning and reiterated his previous statement. He had talked to Jennifer and then dropped her off at the store parking lot. Because the parking lot lacked security cameras, his statement could not be confirmed. Lacking any physical evidence connecting him to Jennifer's disappearance, the authorities had to let him go, but they secretly began monitoring him. On the 30th of April, Jennifer's parents appeared on television, pleading for anyone with information about her disappearance to contact them. Despite this, the police received no helpful new leads. They then re-interviewed Lucio, who again denied any involvement. He admitted to being in a relationship with Jennifer and said he was worried about her. However, the police found his calmness and lack of emotion disturbing. Lucio even suggested that Jennifer might have been kidnapped by Roma people who, he alleged, could have taken her to sell her baby. Because the police lacked concrete proof, they couldn't arrest him. A week later, Lucio vanished. By this time, Lucio's wife discovered his affair with a young, pregnant woman and that he was a suspect in her disappearance. She was shocked because she thought Lucio was a dedicated family man. Feeling betrayed, she filed for divorce and requested full custody of their children. While their marriage crumbled, Lucio fled, apparently intending to hide and avoid further investigation. On May 7th, Lucio called his wife unexpectedly. Unbeknownst to Lucio, the authorities were monitoring his phone and tracked his location to Milan. He was arrested that day and taken to the Marshal Lago police station. Lucio denied any involvement in Jennifer's disappearance, insisting he loved her and was willing to leave his family for her. However, his story changed. He then claimed Jennifer never arrived for their planned meeting that night, but a recording of his phone conversation with Jennifer's mother contradicted this new version of events. Investigators examined Jennifer's cell phone data and found its last signal came from near a gas station about a mile from her house. The gas station had an outdoor security camera, so detectives reviewed the video footage. Although the video quality was poor, the parking lot was almost empty around 9:30 p.m. On the 29th of April, a car pulled into the lot, and despite the unclear details, investigators believed they knew who was inside. At first, nothing happened. Then, a woman abruptly ran from the car, appearing terrified. The driver got out and chased her. The woman, likely hampered by her pregnancy, stumbled several times. The man quickly caught her, hit her repeatedly, and then dragged her by her hair out of the camera's view. Detectives immediately combed the area around the gas station. In the bushes nearby, they found a torn piece of fabric with reddish-brown stains. The fragment was sent to a lab for analysis, and it was soon confirmed that the stains were blood and matched Jennifer's DNA. One critical challenge remained. The car in the video did not belong to Lucio. Without being able to directly tie him to the events shown in the footage, building a case against him was difficult. However, investigators managed to decipher the car's license plate number and issued a search alert for the vehicle. The car was traced to a rental company, and records showed that on the 29th of April, it had been rented by none other than Lucio Niero. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the contradictions in his account, Lucio understood he couldn't keep denying the accusations. He decided to help with the investigation, hoping for a reduced punishment. The investigators' main concern was finding Jennifer's body, since they were certain she was dead. Lucio admitted that he had only been using Jennifer for amusement and never planned to leave his wife for her. He confessed to deceiving Jennifer with false promises. Her pregnancy was unexpected, and he initially hoped to persuade her to have an abortion. However, Jennifer refused, which threatened his marriage and financial security. For 9 months, Lucio waited and hoped Jennifer would change her mind, but she never did. He knew that if she gave birth, the truth would eventually come out, potentially leading to a divorce that would cost him half his business and require him to pay significant child support. To protect his marriage and reputation, Lucio went to great lengths to keep his wife in the dark. Lucio arranged a meeting with Jennifer, and she happily agreed. According to him, he still hoped to convince her to end the pregnancy, seemingly ignoring the fact that she was just days away from giving birth. Their conversation quickly escalated into an argument, and they began shouting at each other. He drove to the gas station, believing it was a secluded spot with no cameras or witnesses where they could continue the discussion. During the argument, Jennifer allegedly threatened to tell his wife everything, which Lucio claimed drove him into a rage. He said he struck her several times in the face to silence her. Jennifer then threatened to report him to the police. She got out of the car and tried to run, but her advanced pregnancy made it difficult for her to move quickly, and she stumbled and fell multiple times. Lucio caught up to her and, in a fit of anger, began hitting her. Then, he dragged her by her hair into a wooded area near the road. Lucio claimed he had no intention of killing Jennifer, but was overcome with rage and lost control. He grabbed a piece of rope lying on the ground and used it to strangle her. However, the rope was old and rotted, breaking in his hands. By the time he realized what had happened, Jennifer was already unresponsive. Panicking, he decided to get rid of her body. He dragged her farther away from the road until he came across a deep trench. Recent rains had turned the ground at the bottom into soft, wet mud. Lucio decided it was the perfect place to hide her body. He threw Jennifer face down into the trench, then climbed in after her and began stomping on her to push her deeper into the muddy ground. He walked back and forth over her body, even jumping on it to press it further into the muck. Afterward, he shoveled some dirt over her, leaving the scene in a rush. Lucio led authorities to the site where he had hidden Jennifer's body. Just a week earlier, construction workers had filled in the trench, making it highly unlikely that anyone would have found Jennifer's remains without Lucio's confession. Excavating the site and recovering the remains required significant effort. Finally, after much effort, they found her. When the remains were sent for forensic examination, the results were shocking. Despite the decomposition, medical examiners identified numerous injuries sustained while Jennifer was alive, including bruises, abrasions, and scratches. Ligature marks on her neck indicated strangulation with a rope, but that was not what caused her death. Jennifer had lost consciousness during the assault, and Lucio had thrown her into the trench while she was still alive. Jennifer tried to breathe, which was evidenced by soil and mud found deep in her airways, ultimately causing her death. Furthermore, as Lucio stomped on her body to push it deeper into the mud, he fractured her spine, collarbone, arm, and several ribs. Experts concluded that both Jennifer and her unborn child would have survived if Lucio had not pushed her into the mud. Despite her injuries, her life, and that of her child, might have been saved. After confessing, Lucio claimed he had acted in a fit of rage, insisting he was temporarily out of his mind. He requested a psychological evaluation, which determined that he was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime. However, experts did note signs of psychopathic tendencies. Prosecutors argued that Lucio's actions were premeditated, believing he was motivated by the financial fallout he would face if his affair and Jennifer's pregnancy became public knowledge, leading to a scandalous divorce. There was no doubt that he committed the crime deliberately, and his primary motive was to protect his wealth. The case became well known, but news outlets didn't mention Jennifer was pregnant. This angered the Zacconi family. Because of this, they decided to give an interview where they discussed Jennifer's pregnancy and shared photos taken after her death of her and her unborn son in a small coffin. Lucio's trial started in 2008, 2 years after the crime occurred. During the trial, the defense argued that Lucio hadn't planned the crime and was emotionally distressed when he committed it. Surprisingly, even though a psychiatric evaluation showed Lucio was mentally competent, the judge decided the crime wasn't intentional. In October 2008, Lucio Niero received a 30-year prison sentence, but he could be eligible for parole after only 15 years. Jennifer's family was very upset by this relatively light sentence. They tried to appeal the decision to get a longer prison term for Lucio, but they failed. The court also ordered Lucio must pay provisional compensation of €80,000 to Jessica's mother, Anna Maria Giannone, and €85,000 to her other relatives. However, Lucio declared bankruptcy and never paid them any money. In 2016, Lucio's good behavior earned him privileges, including daytime work release in the city and multi-week home visits. He was paroled in 2017 after serving 11 years for the violent double crime. Lucio never showed remorse or apologized to Jennifer's parents for the loss of their daughter and unborn grandchild. At the end of April 2017, the unusual silence of Melinda Vasili, a 22-year-old girl who was always cheerful and smiling, made her friends immediately worried. The last person to see her alive was her ex-boyfriend. A stormy love affair with endless arguments, breakups and reunions. Everyone thought this was just another argument. Until the next morning. A horrifying scene was discovered in the small apartment. Melinda was lying motionless in the bedroom, on a bed soaked in blood. She was stabbed 47 times, including 27 in the neck and 6 in the chest. A tragic end to a love that was once expected to last a lifetime. What turned a sweet love into a bloody tragedy? Why did a boy who once vowed to love her become an internationally wanted man? And what is the truth behind those 47 fateful stabs? Let's delve into the whole shocking story. Melinda Vasili was born in Ontario, Canada, on June 28, 1994. She came from a loving, supportive family with her sister, Christina, and brother, David, known for her infectious laughter and ability to cheer others up with her humor and kindness. Melinda was loved by all who knew her. She aspired to be a hairstylist and was working towards that dream. More than anything, Melinda wanted to get married, create a loving relationship, and become a dedicated mother someday. Agar Hassan was born in Hamilton, Ontario, about an hour away from Kitchener. His parents were Kurdish refugees who had escaped Iraq. They fled to Canada to avoid the Anfal campaign, a period of widespread violence and ethnic cleansing targeting Kurds under Saddam Hussein's rule. While Canada offered them safety, they continued to struggle with the emotional pain of being displaced and traumatized. Agar's childhood was difficult, filled with stress and conflict at home. He frequently saw arguments and aggression between family members. As a teenager, Agar was violently attacked, leaving him with both physical and emotional wounds. By the age of 16, he had quit school and become withdrawn. Spending most of his time alone, his emotional difficulties were worsened by 2 events. First, in 2014, his friend Corporal Nathan Cirillo was killed in a terrorist attack in Ottawa. Then, 2 years later, another friend, Alan, died by end his life, jumping from a ferry into Lake Ontario. Agar was deeply saddened by these deaths. Although he seemed distant, he strongly desired emotional connection and attention, a need that would later heavily influence his relationship with Melinda. 2 life stories, shaped in radically different environments, were about to intersect, launching a chain of events that would end in tragedy. Kitchener is a city in southwestern Ontario, Canada, situated a short distance from both Toronto and the American border. Originally named Berlin, the city was renamed in 1916 during World War I. Today, Kitchener is a thriving city with good infrastructure, well-regarded schools, and a vibrant cultural life. A major annual event is Oktoberfest, the largest celebration of its kind outside of Germany. The festival features parades, beer, traditional music, and local food, drawing large crowds of residents and visitors. One of Kitchener's notable landmarks is the West Montrose Covered Bridge, also known as the Kissing Bridge, which was featured in the 2017 film adaptation of Stephen King's It Averable. Against this calm and orderly backdrop, Melinda Vasili lived in a residential complex on Country Hill Drive. The quiet neighborhood, with its neat lawns and nearby parks, Melinda and Agar met in 2016. Melinda, 23, was independent and focused on her career. Agar lived near Kitchener. In Hamilton, they became friends quickly, bonding over shared interests and enjoying each other's company. Soon, they were talking regularly and officially dating. Melinda clearly stated her desire for a serious relationship, a family, and children. Ager initially agreed with her plans, and they began building a life together, discussing daily routines and responsibilities. It appeared they had a good balance in their relationship, but soon, Melinda and Ager started to disagree. Melinda wanted a stable relationship with clear boundaries and a predictable routine. Ager desired constant closeness and needed frequent reassurance. He became upset when communication slowed down or he felt distance between them. Even minor issues, like weekend plans, jealousy, or how they spent their time apart, caused friction. At first, these problems were quickly resolved, but they began happening more often. Their arguments became more heated. Simple explanations turned into lengthy, repetitive discussion. Melinda wanted clear agreements and the freedom to manage her own life. Conversely, wanted more of Melinda's time and attention. Their text messages began to reflect these differences, with growing complaints about tone. Emotional responses. The emotional roller coaster became more pronounced. Calm periods were regularly interrupted by new arguments, each one more intense than the last. Their approaches to resolving conflict also diverged. Ager increasingly framed their disagreements as the result of cultural differences, asking her to be more understanding of his reactions. Melinda felt that it wasn't about background, but about respecting boundaries, and she wanted clear, written agreements. The more she insisted on defined rules, the more he pushed back, asking for exceptions for the sake of the relationship. This led to repeated discussions about personal freedom, trust, and jealousy. By the end of the year, the initial happy period of their relationship had ended. They began disagreeing on important core beliefs rather than minor details. By early 2017, their relationship was in crisis, and they needed to either establish clear boundaries or break up. Right before our one-year anniversary, Melinda decided to end the relationship permanently and abruptly. However, Ager believed it was just a temporary pause and kept contacting her. But Melinda was firm about wanting a complete separation. In February 2017, she traveled to Hamilton to return his belongings and settle practical matters. The meeting turned into a long conversation, and eventually they got back together on the 14th of February. A conscious choice to try again under clearly defined rules. But within weeks, it became obvious that their past issues hadn't gone away. On April 3, 2017, Melinda broke up with Ager via text message, explaining she was unhappy and the relationship wasn't working. Ager, upset by the breakup and Melinda's previous refusal to meet, drove to her apartment in Kitchener. When he arrived at 38 Country Hill Drive, he broke in through the back door. Melinda, who was with her roommate Anna and others, was frightened. They ran to a neighbor's apartment upstairs. Anna's boyfriend and a neighbor tried to de-escalate the situation and peacefully remove Ager. But the argument turned into a physical fight. After neighbors called emergency services, police arrived and arrested Ager at the apartment. He was charged with unlawfully entering the apartment and with 2 counts of assault for fighting with the men inside. After being questioned, Ager was released with the following conditions. He cannot contact Melinda by phone, message, or social media, and he is not allowed to enter Kitchener. These restrictions were put in place to protect Melinda after their breakup, and Ager was made fully aware of them. Despite the court order, Ager Hassan continued to contact Melinda. In 2 weeks, he sent her over 60 messages. These messages varied in tone, including compliments, pleas, expressions of frustration, and veiled threats. He downplayed their disagreements as minor issues caused by cultural differences. He also claimed their relationship was free of infidelity and violence. He pleaded for another chance, insisted he was still committed, and declared he couldn't abandon what he considered the best part of his life. Ager's messages were mostly ignored. On the 20th of April, Melinda explicitly told him to stop contacting her. She wanted him to leave her alone. Reminding him of the restrictions implemented after the break-in, she explained that her request was due to legitimate fears for her safety. He persisted despite the no-contact order. His messages became more frequent and changed in tone. He started by gently asking to meet, then became irritated and demanded an in-person meeting. To explain himself and be understood, he even asked for a final hug. These constant messages clearly broke the no-contact order, but he kept sending them. Melinda knew he acted without thinking sometimes. However, she believed a direct conversation was the only way to truly understand the situation and end the problem. She agreed to meet, but only under specific rules. It had to be at her apartment. With other people there, no one could leave the room, and they couldn't spend a lot of time alone together. To ensure safety, Melinda arranged for 3 people to be in the apartment during the conversation: her roommate Anna, her sister Christina, and a friend named Ella. Their role was to stay nearby, monitor the situation, and intervene if needed. They also agreed that the doors would remain open. Melinda would keep her phone close, and the conversation would be time-limited. This setup was a compromise, balancing her right to peace with the reality of Ager's relentless attempts to make contact. The plan was in place. The next step was the meeting itself. The date was set for the evening of the 27th of April, 2017. Later that night, another guest joined the women in the apartment, increasing the sense of oversight. Ager was supposed to arrive at an agreed-upon time, but he was late. As the night wore on, and he still hadn't shown up, it became clear the meeting might not happen after all. But around midnight, it did arrive. Melinda and Ager started talking privately in the apartment. Although others were there, they were the only ones involved in the conversation. At first, things were calm, but the atmosphere was definitely tense. To give them space, Anna, Ella, and another friend went to Burger King. Security footage from the Burger King showed the women had spent about 30 minutes there. When they returned to the apartment on Country Hill Drive, they found the front door locked. Their knocks and calls went unanswered. After several attempts, the door finally opened. But what greeted them was an eerie silence. The living room and kitchen were neat and showed no signs of a struggle. However, Melinda's bedroom was very disturbing. She was on the floor, and she had been stabbed many times. 2 kitchen knives were near her. One was close to her hand, and the other was a little further away. A forensic report later showed that she had 47 stab wounds on her face, neck, chest, stomach, and arms, including 27 stab wounds to the neck. She also suffered 6 stab wounds to the chest. Some of these wounds appeared to be from when she tried to defend herself. A call to emergency services was made immediately, but when paramedics arrived, they could only confirm that Melinda had passed. Investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle elsewhere in the apartment, indicating that the confrontation had occurred exclusively in the bedroom. The time of death was determined to fall within the during which her friends had been away. By the time, Ager was already gone. The vehicle he had driven was also missing from the scene. After leaving Melinda's apartment on the night of the 27th of April into the early hours of the 28th of April, Ager Hassan made his way toward the U.S. border. Security cameras filmed his car driving over the Peace Bridge from Fort Erie, Ontario, to Buffalo, New York. He crossed the border without incident. Customs officers did not stop him. Later, traffic cameras and license plate readers followed his route through the United States. In Pennsylvania, he stopped at a Walmart, took off his Canadian license plates, and put on different ones. Where those new plates came from was later investigated. By the morning of the 28th of April, Canadian authorities had already issued an alert with details of the suspect and his vehicle. However, since Ager was now on American soil, the case was transferred to American law enforcement, turning it into an international manhunt. Investigators at the crime scene had collected significant evidence against him, such as fingerprints, blood, and witness accounts. Their main concern was stopping him from escaping a larger area. Luckily, his use of highways created a digital record. Toll road and highway cameras showed him traveling south. He didn't try to hide or use back roads. Instead, he stayed on main highways. likely indicating he was in a rush. Investigators thought he was trying to get as far from the border as possible before police were notified. At that time, his final destination was unknown. However, his route through Pennsylvania toward the southern U.S. suggested he was heading for the Mexican border. He wouldn't reach it, though, because the situation would soon change. 3 days after the crime, now outside of New York State, Ager accessed the internet and posted a lengthy message on Reddit detailing his version of what had happened on the night of the 27th of April. The post appeared in a popular subreddit and quickly gained attention, largely because it included information that closely matched details from the ongoing investigation. Ager claimed that his final meeting with Melinda started peacefully, but escalated into an argument due to what he described as her aggressive behavior. According to him, she was the first to grab a knife, and he insisted he acted only in self-defense, attributing the multiple wounds to panic and fear. In an attempt to justify himself, he shifted focus to Melinda's personality, accusing her of being emotionally unstable, quick-tempered, and prone to provoking jealousy. He also mentioned her friends, portraying them as having a negative influence on her decisions. The post included details that only someone present at the scene could have known, such as the positioning of the knives and the timeline of when others left the apartment, further confirming his involvement. Law enforcement viewed the Reddit post as both a form of indirect admission and an attempt to influence public perception. In the comments, some users condemned him, while others asked follow-up questions. Ager replied selectively but kept the conversation going, making his behavior during the manhunt even more unusual. This online confession drew significant media attention and rapidly amplified public interest in the case. From that point forward, the search extended beyond law enforcement. The story was now headlining news on both sides of the border. His name and photos began circulating widely. After that, Ager started using Instagram to create a specific image of himself, someone who, even though he was being chased, was still in charge of his situation. On May 20th, he posted a message complaining about how the police were handling his case. He said they were wrongly making him look like he was running away. He mentioned Nashville, suggesting he was trying to get to the Mexican border. In the same post, he told people not to trust the police and said that if he really wanted to disappear, he would have already. He was speaking with confidence and drama, calling himself intelligent and basically saying he could vanish completely if he wanted to. This show of boldness seemed intended to change the story from the actual evidence to his own thoughts and reasons. On June 18th, he posted several new updates, including 3 photos. One photo featured him with Melinda. The captions accompanying the posts read as a declaration of love. He claimed he had always felt but never knew how to communicate. This emotional display contrasted sharply with his previous arrogance and appeared intended to gain sympathy. Notably, he avoided any direct reference to the events of the 27th of April and 28th. He also failed to acknowledge the no-contact order or his violation of it. These posts didn't reveal any new information. Instead, they seemed designed to present a more sympathetic and regretful image of himself, likely to minimize potential legal repercussions. On the 10th of July, he posted a final message that said, "He coming home. It's time to end the dark chapter of his life and give people the closure they deserve." The post included a somber black and white photo of himself. While he promised to return, he didn't say when, where, or under what conditions he would turn himself in. In short, it was a vague promise that left his plans unclear. Ager used his Instagram posts for 2 main purposes: to control the narrative, countering the investigation and keeping the spotlight on himself, and to gauge public reaction, softening perceptions of his actions. For investigators, these posts provided valuable insight into his intentions and possible whereabouts. On July 11, 2017, in San Antonio, Texas, police arrested a man after a traffic stop. Officers stopped a car because its license plates were reported stolen from Arkansas. The license plate scan triggered an alert, leading to the stop. A search of the vehicle revealed about $600 in counterfeit $20 bills. Based on this evidence, Officers arrested him for further investigation and questioning once authorities confirmed that the man in custody was Ager Hassan. U.S. officials quickly coordinated with their Canadian counterparts. It was verified that Hassan was wanted by police in Kitchener in connection with the death of Melinda Vasilije on the night of the 27th of April to 28th. This situation triggered formal cross-border cooperation protocols. Canadian authorities were notified by RD and notified as under duty. And extradition procedures began. Because the case now involved counterfeit money, federal agencies, including the United States Secret Service, became involved. Ager made brief statements but did not confess to any of the charges against him. He was being held legally in the United States for offenses committed there, while arrangements were being made to send him back to Canada to face charges. At his hearing in San Antonio, Ager's lawyers asked the court to release him on bail. They argued that he had no previous criminal record in the U.S. and was willing to help with the investigation. The prosecution opposed bail, emphasizing that Ager had run from the police for a long time after the crime, crossed the border illegally, used fake license plates, and driven a stolen car. They also noted he had counterfeit money. The court considered all the risks, including the possibility that Ager would flee again and the potential danger to the public. The judge refused to grant bail, stating that Hassan had already shown he intended to avoid being brought to justice and had previously broken the law. He will stay in United States custody until he is extradited to Canada. Meanwhile, Canada submitted a formal dossier to support the extradition request, including details of the crime, witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Following his arrest in San Antonio, the transfer of Ager Hassan to Canadian authorities began. The legal process took several months, involving mutual agreement under the bilateral extradition treaty, review of evidentiary sufficiency, and coordination with ongoing United States charges. Ager remained in custody throughout this time. On the 5th of January, 2018, he was extradited under escort back to Ontario to face legal proceedings in Canada. Formal charges were filed, and he was placed in a detention facility awaiting trial. From 2018 to 2019, the case went through the standard pretrial steps for a major felony. This included preliminary hearings, sharing evidence, finalizing witness lists, and preparing forensic reports and physical exhibits. Lawyers argued about what evidence could be used in court, how it would be shown to the jury, and the order in which witnesses would testify. The trial was originally set for 2019, but it was delayed due to events that happened. The global issue pandemic brought court operations in Ontario to a near standstill, especially for in-person jury trials. Priority was given to urgent cases, while complex, multi-episode trials were postponed. As a result, the trial windows for Ager's case were repeatedly delayed throughout 2021 and 2022. The court calendar was adjusted multiple times. Shifting dates, backup slots, courtroom assignments, and judge availability. The main trial to begin on the 19th of April, 2023 in Kitchener. By that point, the evidence file was comparable in volume to a full-scale homicide case. Detailed forensic analysis of injuries, a timeline of events from that night, security camera footage, and numerous messages exchanged before and after the tragedy. This marked the end of a 4-year gap between Ager Hassan's extradition and the start of legal proceedings. The delays were not due to re-evaluation of the case's merits, but to logistical hurdles and global issue. Ager's defense claimed it was not a planned act, but rather a case of self-defense. According to their narrative, the conflict erupted after Ager admitted to having been involved with other women during past breaks in his relationship with Melinda. Allegedly, she grabbed a kitchen knife and tried to strike him in the face, but hit his hands instead. He reacted instinctively, blacked out briefly, and when he regained awareness, saw her on the floor and believed the danger had passed. So, he left. A message he sent at 3:39 a.m. was presented by the defense as evidence of his belief that things might still be reconciled. Cuts on his hands were described by the defense as consistent with self-defense, and the multiple injuries were attributed to panic and chaotic motion in a confined space. The prosecution argued that it was a deliberate act. They cited witness testimony from Anna, Christina, and Ela, who confirmed that Melinda was alone with Ager in the room just before they left, and that there had been no signs of conflict prior. Surveillance footage from outside the apartment captured Melinda walking Ager to his car around 1:45 a.m. He returned alone 10 to 15 minutes later and was seen running back to his car at about 2 o'clock a.m. He never called emergency services. The autopsy revealed dozens of wounds, 27 to the neck and 6 to the chest. 2 knives were used, one with a serrated blade, which was found damaged and lying near her, and a standard kitchen knife discovered near the exit. Melinda had clear defensive wounds on her hands. The prosecution argued that Ager's cuts were not from defending himself, but resulted from his hand slipping on a blood-covered blade during the act itself. The court also reviewed the final messages exchanged between Melinda and Ager. In their communication, he showed recurring patterns of behavior. When Melinda asked for space, he would alternate between flattery, please, frustration, and promises to change. At the same time, he dismissed Melinda's boundaries, insisting they were meant to be, and denying any toxic dynamics. He also attempted to undermine her trust in her friends, implying they had selfish motives. Melinda's messages, by contrast, showed no hesitation or indication of possible reconciliation. She was firm in her intent to end all contact. To the prosecution, the message history became part of a behavioral pattern: escalating pressure after rejection, attempts to control time, space, and communication, manipulative explanations for conflicts, and efforts to discredit Melinda's close relationships. Investigators also closely examined Ager's actions on social media following Melinda's passing. Offensive messages appeared on Facebook, targeting both her memory and her mother. These degrading posts diminished Melinda's identity and significance. Prosecutors presented technical data linking these posts to Ager's devices and accounts, including IP addresses, login times, and phone models that were used in his presence. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence proving Ager wrote the online posts. They proposed that someone else could have accessed his accounts, possibly because his passwords were compromised or due to his mental instability at the time. His lawyers further requested that the posts be removed from the case because their authenticity couldn't be verified. However, the prosecution asserted that the posts were relevant because they aligned with Ager's behavior after the crime, which included being provocative online, attempting to control public opinion, and using inflammatory language. They argued that even if someone else wrote some of the posts, their timing, tone, and the way they addressed Melinda's family resembled Ager's usual communication style. The prosecution believed including the posts would give the jury a better understanding of his character and show that Melinda's family continued to suffer emotionally after her death. For the jurors, it wasn't just a series of isolated events. It was an ongoing pattern of behavior that disregarded the victim and her family's feelings. During the final phase of the trial, the court heard personal impact statements from Melinda's family and friends describing the aftermath of her death. These statements weren't about legal arguments. They offered the jury and the judge a glimpse into how the tragedy had permanently changed the lives of those who loved her. Melinda's mother began, her voice heavy with emotion and often breaking as she spoke. She described the constant grief she felt each day, from the moment she woke up to the moment she went to sleep with the same pain. Melinda's absence had left a huge emptiness in their home, disrupting their family routines and making them feel unsafe and lost. She stressed that their suffering didn't end with Melinda's death. The court case forced them to relive the trauma, repeatedly hearing the gruesome details of the crime, seeing disturbing images, and hearing Melinda's life misrepresented in public discussions. Melinda's friends described her as kind, warm, and always willing to help. Some expressed a sense of personal guilt, feeling that maybe they could have convinced her to end contact with Ager once and for all, preventing that final meeting. Others shared memories of cherished moments, trips, and future plans that were never fulfilled. The court listened to each victim's statement without stopping them. These emotional accounts didn't change the crime's legal definition or the punishment given. However, they were a significant part of the proceedings. They served as a reminder that the charges and scientific evidence represented real people whose lives were forever altered by the crime. After the closing arguments, the courtroom was silent as everyone awaited the verdict. The jury found Agar Hassan guilty of second-degree murder after weeks of testimony and discussion. This means the jury believed he intended to kill someone, but they didn't find enough evidence to prove he planned the murder in advance. The court sentenced Agar Hassan to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. The judge made it clear that being eligible for parole doesn't mean he will be released. The parole board will consider his behavior in prison, whether he has been rehabilitated, and if he is still a danger to the community. The verdict brought Melinda's family the official end of the trial, but not real justice. They said no punishment could ever bring her back or undo their pain. Even with the trial over, they still wondered what truly happened that night. Was it a spontaneous act during an argument? Or was it a planned event? The family may never know the answer. The court delivered its legal judgment, but the motives and the thoughts in Agar's mind that night remain known only to him. For some, the evidence pointed to a spontaneous act of aggression. For others, it appeared to be calculated and deliberate. That question now lives outside the courtroom in the memories of those who knew and loved Melinda. The murder of Melinda Vasiliji not only took away an ambitious young woman, but also left an indelible scar on her family and friends. Agar Hassan's life sentence, with a 16-year non-parole period, is a step toward justice. But it does nothing to ease the pain of those left behind. Melinda's story is a painful reminder of the consequences of control and violence in relationships, and it will spur society to recognize and act to prevent similar tragedies. Although the trial has ended, Melinda's memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved her. There are lives that end because of money, emotional conflict, or revenge. But in Lima, Peru, one life was taken over something as trivial: a plate of fried rice worth less than $2. Inside a small neighborhood restaurant, 22-year-old Shirley Silva argued about the lack of chicken in her meal. Seconds later, she reached into her bag, not for coins, but for a gunshot to the head of the young cook. The bullet, piercing through his skull and striking the wall, turned the late-night dinner into a nightmare. Everyone froze, no one daring to move except Shirley and her friend. They simply walked out as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a scene of horror. This event marked the culmination of years filled with chaos, abuse, and crime, experiences that ultimately defined the woman Peruvians would later recognize as La Gata. Shirley Silva was born on September 22, 1995, in Lima, the capital of Peru. She was the first child of Angel Silva and Sandra Yizel Padilla, a young couple from Esperanza. Angel was only 18 years old when he became a father, while Sandra was just 16. As time passed, their family grew. Shirley was later joined by two younger brothers, Kennedy, and eventually, the youngest sibling, Angel. However, their parents' relationship was unstable, and both later had children with other partners. Shirley's childhood was far from easy. She grew up in a troubled home, witnessing violence and hardship from an early age. Her father would disappear for extended periods, and her mother was often absent as well. This left Shirley with the heavy responsibility of caring for her younger siblings, despite still being a child herself. It is believed that she dropped out of school during her first year of secondary education. When her parents finally separated, the children were caught in the middle of bitter conflicts and accusations. Sandra frequently reported Angel for domestic violence, while Angel, in turn, accused Sandra of neglecting their children. Official reports describe the siblings as unkempt, malnourished, and infested with lice. The lack of affection from her parents took its toll. Their ongoing disputes created a toxic environment, and Shirley often bore the brunt of their aggression. She endured physical abuse from both, and her freedom was severely restricted. She was rarely allowed to go out and enjoy life as other children did. Shirley would later describe her father as someone who did not always behave rationally, as he suffered from schizophrenia. As for her mother, Shirley saw her as nervous, quick-tempered, and immature. To make matters even more challenging, Sandra had multiple children, which only added to the instability of their home. Shirley had a history of violent incidents, some of which left lasting consequences. One of the most notable was when she attacked a teacher with a broken bottle, leaving him with facial injuries. She later claimed that she had acted in defense of her brother, alleging that the teacher had mistreated him. Another incident involved the father of a child who had previous conflicts with her younger brother. In a heated confrontation, Shirley cut the man's hand, but perhaps the most shocking event occurred during a fight with her own father. She sliced off part of his ear. She later justified her actions, saying she had endured years of physical abuse, including punches, kicks, and other violent treatment at his hands. At the time, she was still a minor, and with her mother's support, she reported the incidents to the authorities. As Shirley grew older, she blossomed into an eye-catching young woman with a slender figure. She loved to showcase. She was passionate about reggaeton dancing, makeup, tattoos, and photography. Socializing was one of her favorite pastimes, and she thrived in the company of friends. However, living in one of Lima's most dangerous districts, she became involved with a feared criminal group known as Los Diabolicos. Within their ranks, she earned the nickname La Gata due to her striking, almond-shaped eyes and her fearless attitude. By 2012, at just 16 years old, Shirley faced a traumatic experience. While waiting at a bus stop, a man abused her. She was approached by a stranger who persistently asked for her phone number. When she ignored him, the man used his strength to restrain her, dragging her toward a nearby staircase. There, he forcibly touched her and attempted to remove her pants, but Shirley fought back fiercely, preventing the assault. Frustrated, the attackers stole her phone instead. In a moment of distraction, she managed to escape and noticed him entering a nearby house. Wasting no time, she sought help from the police, reporting both the assault and the theft. By the 16th of October, 2013, Shirley's life had already taken a darker turn. She was arrested for stealing more than 300 souls, around $80 in valuables from a restaurant. When police searched her, they found a knife. At just 18, Shirley had plunged into a reckless lifestyle filled with crime, banned substance, and alcohol. On May 2, 2014, she was arrested again, this time for assaulting a night security guard. Authorities also discovered 9 packets of marijuana and a pipe coated with industrial adhesive used for inhalation. Cheap and toxic, the glue-like substance gave users a brief high and dulled hunger, selling on the streets for as little as 6 Peruvian soles, about $1.70. Shirley often drifted through nights in rundown motels with casual lovers, sinking deeper into chaos. By the 25th of October, 2017, at 22 years old, Shirley was living off sex work and heavy substance abuse. That morning, she woke up next to a 40-year-old shoe store owner with whom she occasionally had paid encounters. The night before, they had checked into the Hotel Universo, a cheap downtown lodging house. At dawn, the man left in a hurry, forgetting his fully loaded pistol with 12 bullets in a dresser drawer. Shirley, always quick to search her surroundings, to found the weapon and didn't think twice. She took it. By the time the man returned to retrieve it, both Shirley and the gun were gone, still restless and eager to continue the party. Shirley goes in search of Francisco Alway Carrillo, a 31-year-old motorbike taxi driver with whom she had an unstable relationship. Francisco was resting at home when Shirley called to him from the street, persuading him to come out. Soon after, the two were riding his moto-taxi to a liquor shop to buy rum. Along the way, they ran into another moto-taxi driver, an acquaintance of Francisco. When offered a drink, the man refused, but his teasing remarks toward Shirley quickly escalated the tension. Irritated, Shirley reached into her bag, pulled out the pistol, and aimed it at him. The gun jammed. She threw it down. The magazine slipped out, and when she picked it back up, she fired twice. Both shots missed. Startled, the man fled, yelling at her to stop. Francisco thought it was a joke and kept driving. A few blocks later, Shirley spotted an old friend, Diego Alex Marticorena, known as Chambo, a 21-year-old aspiring DJ and rapper who performed on buses and in small clubs. She asked Francisco to stop so she could greet him. Chambo, friendly but flirtatious, began complimenting Shirley in a way that irritated her. She told him she wasn't interested, but he lingered. When he asked Francisco for a cup to share a drink, Francisco, annoyed by his persistence, told him to leave. Insults flew. Tempers boiled over. Soon, Francisco and Chambo were wrestling on the ground. In the chaos, Shirley pulled out the pistol once more. She later claimed she only fired to break up the fight, not to hit anyone. But the bullet struck Chambo in the chest. He collapsed instantly, still clutching the notebook filled with his song lyrics. His life ended there on the pavement, with 2 gunshot wounds. Panicked but determined, Shirley grabbed Francisco's hand and urged him to leave. She told him she needed money, leading him to her home. When her brother didn't answer the door, Shirley fired 2 warning shots into the air. Moments later, the 20-year-old appeared and handed her 100 sols. At first, Shirley and Francisco planned to check into a hostel, as they often did, but Shirley suddenly changed her mind. She was hungry. Instead, they stayed within familiar streets and made their way to Santa Rosa Avenue, a stretch known for its Chinese Peruvian chifa restaurants. By 1 o'clock a.m. on the 26th of October, 2017, Shirley and Francisco walked into Alexandra Chifa and ordered shofa, the classic fried rice dish. They even asked for an extra plate to share, but after barely touching the food, they stood up to leave. At the door, Dolminga, one of the owners, stopped them. The bill was only 6 sols. She grabbed Shirley's arm and locked the door. Her husband, Freddy Marcus Elias, the restaurant's cook, came forward to remind them, politely, that they needed to pay. Shirley flatly refused, arguing the shofa didn't have enough chicken. Freddy calmly explained that what she wanted was a special order, but before he could finish, Shirley reached into her bag. For a second, it looked like she was pulling out money. Instead, she drew the pistol. Without saying a word, she fired a single shot into Freddy's head. The bullet went straight through him, striking the wall. Freddy collapsed instantly. Shirley and Francisco turned the weapon on the rest of the diners, warning them not to move. Then, as if nothing had happened, they walked out into the night. Instead of fleeing or hiding, they went to a bar to keep drinking. Freddy never made it to the hospital alive. At just 27 years old, he left behind his wife, their 8-year-old daughter, and the small family business he had worked so hard to build. By 5 o'clock a.m., Shirley and Francisco checked into Hostel El Dolar. 2 hours later, while Shirley slept, Francisco slipped out. By 9:30 a.m., police arrested Shirley as she stepped outside the hostel, betrayed by the very man she thought was her partner. Francisco, it turned out, had gone straight to the station to confess, hoping to save himself. He too was arrested once police confirmed his criminal record for aggravated robbery. In interrogation, their contrasts were stark. Francisco was nervous, hesitant. Shirley, in chilling calm, described the shootings in detail. She claimed not to remember why she acted that way. Blaming intoxication. Asked if she felt remorse, she simply said, "No." She called Chambo's death just a game, insisted she had been messing around, and described the moment as if she were in a trance. On Freddy's murder, she was even colder. She said it was all a blur, that she didn't know if she regretted it, because she had never met him. When asked what she would say to Freddy's family, her answer was cruel. Their son was drunk. What unsettled investigators most was her indifference. She laughed at Francisco for being scared, demanded special meals from police, and even bragged about firing 6 bullets, carefully counting those that remained. Authorities concluded that, had she not been caught, Shirley would have continued her violent spree. The evidence was overwhelming. Within days, both Shirley and Francisco were formally charged and placed in preventive detention. At the preliminary hearing, which lasted 3 hours, the judge ordered them held for 9 months while prosecutors built their case, later extended until trial. Freddy's family attended, demanding that the court acknowledge Shirley's full awareness at the time of the crime. They feared her claims of memory loss would be used as a defense. Witnesses from the restaurant confirmed what the family already knew. Neither Shirley nor Francisco seemed drunk that night. If they had, the owners would have demanded payment up front, as they always did with visibly intoxicated customers. A year later, in October 2018, Shirley Silva stood before the court via video conference from prison. At the start, judges offered her the option of an expedited trial, plead guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. Shirley accepted. Calmly, she admitted her guilt and took full responsibility for every charge. But the most chilling part of the hearing wasn't her confession. It was the psychological report. Experts diagnosed Shirley with a severe conduct disorder, a profile consistent with psychopathy. The evaluation described her as manipulative, incapable of guilt, unable to distinguish right from wrong, and obsessed with notoriety. For her, the media coverage was fuel, giving her the twisted recognition she craved. Toxicology tests ruled out any intoxication that night. That detail was crucial. It meant her charges were elevated from manslaughter to aggravated homicide. Intent to kill, the harshest category. Shirley Silva was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated homicide. Freddy Marcos Elias and Diego Alex Marticorena Chombo. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to pay financial restitution to the victims' families. She is expected to be released as early as October 2043. Francisco, her partner that night, was sentenced for aiding and abetting and for failing to help a person in danger. His case drew little attention, overshadowed by Shirley's notoriety. But the story didn't end there. Months later, Shirley's own mother was caught sneaking a cell phone into prison for her daughter. And not long after, Shirley attempted an escape with other high-risk inmates. Authorities discovered blueprints of the prison with multiple escape routes. The plan failed, and she was swiftly transferred to a maximum security facility, even behind bars. Shirley showed no remorse. On Facebook, she defiantly wrote that she would come back, stronger than ever. Online, her case has become the subject of bizarre memes and fan pages. Shockingly, she even attracted admirers, men praising her looks while ignoring her crimes. For the families of Freddy and Chombo, the memes and admiration were another wound. They had demanded the maximum sentence of 35 years. Instead, they were left with the haunting truth. Their loved ones were gone, while Shirley, unrepentant, had become a morbid kind of celebrity. And that's the tragic legacy of La Gata. A life of banned substance, violence, and chaos that left behind death, grief, and unanswered questions about a society that sometimes glorifies the criminal more than it mourns the victims.